Welcome back to Beyond the Box Score. I'm your host, Jacob Gibbs. I've got a jam-packed show for you today. I'm very excited to get into it. It's just going to be a ton of information. I'm just trying to catch you up on all of the stuff that I've been learning about what we saw in week one, kind of contextualize everything that we got, and look forward to the upcoming weeks and see how this might all develop. So the plan is to do this every Wednesday and keep track of this together as we kind of ride out the season and see like how backfields are developing, how things are trending in different directions. So I've got all sorts of stuff for you today. It's going to be first read target rates from the fantasy points data suite. It's going to be expected fantasy points. A lot of the stuff that you've heard me talk about before. If you're a Beyond the Box Score listener, we're going to go through every position and every team. Should be fun. It's going to be a little weird, just me with no Dan. So I hope you can stand that. Definitely miss Dan, but I honestly don't know how long this will take. And so for the first attempt here, we're just going to go cut as much of the fat as we can and like just have the information. And if it doesn't take 3 hours, then we're definitely going to get Dan the man in here because that's more fun for everybody. Alrighty, starting with quarterback notes for you. I've been digging into all the film as much as I can. I've watched probably 2/3 of the teams at this point, and I've been digging into the charting data from fantasypointsdata.com because they are also watching all the film. And so I definitely want to, test my eyes versus theirs and kind of see where we're landing on similar takeaways and where we're not. What kind of stuff I might find there. And I definitely found some interesting notes. So QB notes for you. Accuracy is still bad for Patrick Mahomes. He ranked dead last in catchable ball rate on throws of 5 or more air yards without pressure in week one. That's brutal. It was a problem for him last year. It was a problem for him in 2023 as well. So it's not just the deep passing, but just overall, we need the accuracy to be cleaned up in Kansas City. For sure. They were very pass heavy in this game, but it was a struggle for anybody who watched that game to move the ball. At the same time, Mahomes obviously made plenty of heroic plays. It was a heroic effort from him overall, but the charting does not paint a pretty picture here. So that's something to keep an eye on as we move forward. 3 quarterbacks were charted with 0 off-target throws on such attempts, the 5 or more air yard attempts with no pressure. That's Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, and Matthew Stafford. 0 off-target throws when throwing 5 or more yards down the field without pressure. I wanted to bring up Trevor Lawrence as well. He stood out to me here. Watching the film was rough. There were several misplays. Like if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen the BTJ miss and a few other ones too that were frustrating. Overall, his charting doesn't look too bad. He was charted as QB 17 in catchable ball rate and QB 10 in highly accurate throw rate on these throws, 5 or more air yards with no pressure. So hopefully it's not maybe as bad as it seemed over a larger sample size here. I want to bring up some pressure notes. CJ Stroud was pressured like crazy in week one. We were hoping that maybe things might be better, but that hope proved to be unfounded. They really didn't improve the offensive line. They just sort of changed it and got new coaching. It looked pretty much the same. But when Stroud was pressured, he was 8 for 11 with a 100% catchable ball rate. He took 4 sacks. He also scrambled 4 times and created some plays. So shout out CJ Stroud. Always. He is not the problem. Michael Penix, 9 for 13 when pressured with a 77% catchable ball rate and a 69% highly accurate throw rate. Only Joe Burrow was more accurate versus pressure in week one. So that is a great note for Penix. Pressure has been a bit of a concern for him. He was outside of the top 30 in accuracy versus pressure last year, but it was a small sample size. So it was good to see him pass the test in week one here against Todd Bowles and a really blitz-heavy defense. Sam Darnold was 5 for 7 when pressured with a 71% catchable ball rate. That's been an area where he's struggled in the past, so hope to see more good stuff there from him. The offense we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about every team. The offense is a little frustrating overall, but when pressured, he held up all right. A couple quarterbacks who did not. Russell Wilson, 3 for 14 with a league low 39% catchable ball rate when pressured. Geno Smith played great overall. Really thrived within the Chip Kelly design here. We're going to get to that later as well. Was 4 for 9 with a 33% off target rate against pressure. That was the highest off target rate among quarterbacks with more than 5 throws versus pressure. He took 4 sacks on 14 pressure dropbacks. So that's been a thing for Geno in the past. The Raiders' offensive line did not play very well in this game. Didn't create very much push at all in the run game. And then also we saw, the problems against pressure here for Geno. So that could be, optimism abounds right now with what we saw with Chip Kelly and the Raiders offense. That could be something that, causes problems for them if they're not, facing a defense that was really maybe the easiest to attack other than the Dolphins down the field. If you look at the average separation scores, which we're going to get into, the Raiders receivers all look amazing, which is probably more of a note about the Patriots defense playing without Christian Gonzalez in this spot. One more quarterback note, Bryce Young was 2 for 9 with a 44% catchable ball rate versus pressure. Overall, Bryce's charting data actually looks a lot better than you might expect based off of the online reception to the Panthers Week 1 game. I just wanted to bring this up, that he didn't really have very many clear answers. I've only watched half of the Carolina game. That's where I stopped. So I'm excited to get back to that. But that's been an area where Bryce has played well in the past, was against pressure. And so I don't love to see this. I think he did miss Adam Thielen in this game. So that could be a problem if this persists. But overall, like I said, his when not pressured, his accurate throw rate, his catchable ball rate, all of that looked pretty good. Moving on to some running back notes. I've got the percentage of rushing yards that came after contact for some of the top running backs. These running backs were creating yards on their own. For Chase Brown, it was 123%, which means on average he was hit behind the line of scrimmage. Tyrone Tracy, same thing, 108%. He didn't create a lot, but anything that he did, he worked for it. 105% for Kenneth Walker, 96% Bijan Robinson, 91% Aaron Jones, 90% Dylan Sampson, 88% David Montgomery, 87% Ashton Genty, and 81% Bucky Irving. So just wanted to point those names out to you if you are feeling a little bit nervous about the lack of rushing efficiency for any of those players. I know there were some really good running backs there who only averaged 2 yards per carry, and that does not feel good. It's a 1-game sample size. I wouldn't overreact to it. There really wasn't any room to run. If you watch the Bucky Irving cut up that I put out on Twitter, it's really amazing that he got what he did. And so what I've got here pulled up on the YouTube screen in reference to Bucky Irving and Ashton Genty is the role, the percentage of the offensive touches that each of these running backs accounted for. You can see here Chase Brown at the top, 62%. Tony Pollard, 58%. What else were they going to do in this spot? Christian McCaffrey at 50%. Josh Jacobs at 49%. And then we arrive at Bucky Irving at 45%. Offensive engine Bucky Irving. We love to see that. And you will notice here, Ashton Genty, Bucky Irving, the percentage of their scrimmage yards that they accounted for, the team's scrimmage yards, much, much lower than the rest of the running backs in this group. So for Chase Brown, 32% of the scrimmage yards. Tony Pollard, 49% of the scrimmage yards. CMC, 36%. Then we get to Bucky, who is in a similar range in terms of touches, only 17% of the team's scrimmage yards. Ashton Genty had 44% of the touches, but only 9.6% of the scrimmage yards. To me, that's something that's bound to regress, and especially if you think that these guys are potentially like special players, which is what I really think we might have here with Ashton Genty, and I feel very convicted that that is what we have with Bucky Irving. Both these offenses could be good. The Raiders, put a lot of yards up in week 1. We know the Bucs offense could be good. They're working through some things up front with Tristan Wirfs out, moving, Graham Barton to left tackle, moving things around, trying to figure out something that works. And so that's going to affect Bucky, and maybe the Raiders' offensive line is going to affect Genty all year. And these running backs won't be as efficient as we know that they can be, but they're probably going to be a lot more efficient than this. And so if the offense continues to put numbers on the board, things could really scale up in a big way. Like both those running backs were usable in fantasy this week. And I think that was really like near the bottom of the range of outcomes for them given the role. So I think just wheels up with those guys. Do not panic. And the same could be said for any of the running backs that I just started this conversation off with, Ashton Genty, where it's like they really earned everything they got. Maybe you're panicking about Kenneth Walker, maybe Aaron Jones. There were some usage related things to worry about, but overall, I wouldn't worry about the efficiency for these guys. Dylan Sampson, same thing. 90% of his total rushing yards came after contact. I tweeted out a cut up of all of his touches in week 1. Youngest running back in the NFL, almost 100 scrimmage yards, 20 touches in his first game. Everything we saw there is very encouraging. And I think the film is as well. So I'm not going to overreact to the fact that, a lot of these running backs were getting hit well behind the line of scrimmage pretty often in their first game. A couple other, effectiveness, efficacy, efficiency related notes on these running backs, and then we'll get into usage. Top 5 running backs in rushing yards over expectation. This is per Next Gen Stats. This is their attempt to quantify, relative to the circumstances of the play, how did this running back do at creating yards on their own? Jordan Mason comes in at RB5. That passes the eye test for me. I feel like Mason played really well. He looked like the guy that he always does when he's healthy. Breece Hall, RB4, looked like the guy that we used to know. So that was good to see him in this metric, looking good. Derrick Henry, RB3. Bill Krosky-Merritt, RB2 in yards over expectation per rush. Travis Etienne, RB1, breaking off that massive 70-plus yard run definitely adds to that. So good week for all those guys. Really, really couldn't have been happier with the film on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in week 1. I know a lot of people were hating on his preseason film. Didn't feel like he had the juice. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you guys. The start stop is so good with him. He's making people miss all over the place, and he's tempoing his runs and finding spots. Here, I'll just get into more efficiency stats here. Yeah, you guys know. Beyond the Box Score listeners know. Percentage of runs that gained positive yards in week 1. Javonte Williams, number 1, 93% Javonte Williams. Did not see that coming. If he keeps doing this, he's going to keep getting the rock, and Jadon Blue is going to keep watching from the sidelines. 92% Nick Chubb, number 2. So we've got some vets at the top of the board here doing what's asked of them, maybe not creating a whole lot beyond that, but getting positive yardage on over 90% of the runs. Number 3, we've got a tie here. Breece Hall and Bill Krosky-Merritt, 90% of their runs, positive yards. 89% for Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, 88% for Travis Etienne, 83% for Derrick Henry, James Conner, Tony Pollard. That is so impressive if you watched this game going into Denver with really no one on the offense stepping up except for Pollard and Cam Ward. We'll talk about Tennessee more later. For him to be at the top of this list is crazy to me. Zach Charbonnet, the other name here at 83%, which I think is relevant because Kenneth Walker ranked 32 out of 32 running backs in this metric. 50% of his runs gained positive yards. Percentage of runs gaining 5 or more yards. I really just telling you this stat because I want to point out the Bills number 1. 60% of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt's runs gained 5 or more yards in week 1. 50% for Zach Charbonnet. 47% for Breece the Beast. Big fan of Beyond the Box Score. 47% for Jordan Mason. 44% for Derrick Henry and Travis Etienne. All right, that is running back effectiveness. We're going to take our first break real quick. Let me get a drink of water, and then we're going to get back and talk about some usage notes at RB.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
We are back. Producer Josh is telling me to take a victory lap, and I guess by acknowledging it right here, that's what I'm doing. But we don't need to do that. We're beyond the box score. We know what we're doing here. We're not trying to, prove anything. We're just trying to find the answers, and the answer was that Bill Krosky merits freaking good, baby. You love to see it. All right. So we've got on the screen here the week 1 running back usage thread. If you want to go do some exploring on your own, I've got it all here for you. Snap rates, route rates, expected fantasy points, actual fantasy points. Every backfield is covered. You can go look. Got the XFP leaderboard, courtesy of the Fantasy Points data suite. If you're unfamiliar with XFP, that is expected fantasy points based off of where each touch occurred, each opportunity. Is it close to the red zone? Targets are worth more. Different types of targets are worth more than other types of targets. They try to quantify everything that happened and give you an expected fantasy point number. If you simulated this, outcome 100 times, like what would be the average expected fantasy point number? And you can see that for every running back here in this thread. You can also look at each team and see exactly how things were split up. So it's good stuff there. Definitely go check that out. There's one for wide receivers and tight end as well. So I'm going to get into some usage notes here, starting with XFP. And then I want to talk about just a few other things at running back before we move on and look at wide receivers and tight end. So if you go to the Fantasy Points data suite, there's of course all sorts of cool stuff over there. And by the way, I have a promo code for you guys that I don't remember off the top of my head. I've got too much information in my head right now. I'm sorry. But if you watched the Thursday show with Ryan Heath, look at me, Plug Prince. Thursday's show with Ryan, he knows the promo code. He'll tell you. Anyway, over here on the Fantasy Points data suite, you can check out this bell cow report, which is pretty cool. I've got it customized here, which you can do over here with the columns and look at exactly what you want. So I've got percentage of snaps, rush attempts, targets, routes, route rate, and XFP. At the running back position, we're just going to do a quick rundown here. And then, of course, you can go check it out yourself if you'd like. For the audio listeners, Christian McCaffrey, running back 1, XFP 30 is the number. He's the only running back over the past 4 years to have a season where he averaged over 20. So 30, yes, is ridiculous. Bijan Robinson is next, a distant next at 22.8, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs at 18.9 because he had all of those targets. This is for PPR. No, this is for half PPR. So still, even targets are worth a lot. Targets are worth a lot of fantasy points. You can do different scoring systems here. Tied with Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor at 18.9. Chase Brown, RB5. DeAndre Swift is next. I think that he's going to start losing some of that XFP to Kyle Monange. We'll talk about the effectiveness of this backfield later for sure. Dylan Sampson, RB7. James Cook, Saquon Barkley, James Conner round out the top 10. And then you've got Javonte Williams, Kyron Williams, Chuba Hubbard, maybe not the most exciting running backs, but still getting so much work. We did see some targets for Chuba this week, which is not what we're used to. But it's getting so much work that they are, up approaching the top 10, approaching RB1 status. Ashton Genty, Bucky Irving are next, followed by Travion Henderson. Travion at RB16 was a surprise. But again, targets are worth so much, and that's why everyone was so excited about this guy. That's part of the reason why. I think we're only going to see that role grow as the season goes on. They're already talking about getting him more work. Travis Etienne here at RB17 might even grow now that Tank Bigsby's gone. Josh Jacobs, RB18. Breece Hall, RB19. Jalen Warren, RB20. You can go check out the whole list over at fantasypointsdata.com. Good stuff over there. Okay, route rates is what I want to talk about next. Few concerning ones that stood out to me. Breece Hall is the clearest one. 28% route rate for Breece Hall is weird. I thought it was going to be much higher. So that's something I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. If you noticed, he was like RB19 or something in XFP. He was awesome. He played phenomenal in week 1, but I don't necessarily know that we can expect that every week. I want to see the role be better than this, be more fantasy friendly than this, and route rate is a huge part of that. Travion Henderson's route rate was only 32%. He did not have a single pass pro snap, so that's something that scares me a little bit. I think that they're going to increase that, but we thought like that was going to be a big part of what he offered was the passing down acumen, and it wasn't there in week 1. Chase Brown and Kyron Williams both had a route rate below 50%. So for reference, the top of the leaderboard in week 1, you've got Bijan Robinson at 77%, Christian McCaffrey at 72, Javonte Williams at 71, Saquon Barkley at 67, Jahmyr Gibbs at 61%. And then everybody else is like in that 50 to 60% range. But Chase Brown and Kyron Williams were both below 50%. And those guys have at times been, some of the highest running backs in the NFL in terms of route rate. Kyron Williams' rate last year was 59%. It started out at 75% in week 1, but then just kind of dwindled as the year went on. And so we saw that carry over to week 1, something to keep an eye on. They don't really throw to the running back position anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. Chase Brown is the one who's probably more notable because they do throw to the running back position, and his rate was regularly in the 50 to 75% range as a starter last year. It was never below 50% upon becoming a starter, and it was 43% in week 1. He had 3 pass protection reps, tied with Samaje Perine. So maybe this is a trend. I don't know. Overall, I'm only encouraged about Chase Brown's work. Like I showed earlier, he had over 60% of the team's touches. So don't sound the panic alarm quite yet. Probably somebody that you should be buying, if anything. Let's talk about a few more pass pro numbers here. Ramondre Stevenson, I mentioned no pass pro work for Henderson. 12 pass pro reps for Stevenson was the most in the NFL at running back, tied with Ashton Genty. Tony Pollard had 11 pass pro reps. So I think that sort of limited his role. Normally, I think we're going to see that route rate higher for Tony Pollard. And I just bring that up because like he still was top 20, I believe, in XFP. Oh, no, he's RB 26. That surprised me because he had so many touches. But yeah, I mean, when your team never gets to the red zone, it's hard to expect anything from you. They're not going to play Denver every week. I think overall, Tony Pollard, as long as he can stay healthy, is probably going to crush in this role. The only other pass pro note I had was that Cam Scatterbu got 2 pass protection reps and did fine on both of them. It was kind of the same thing we saw in college where he's just throwing his whole body at players. I don't know how sustainable that is. But the fact that they let him pass protect, one of them was on the goal line, more than Devin Singletary, only 1 pass pro rep for him. So I just thought that was interesting because I thought there was a chance that like they're not going to let him do that all year because that was probably the weakest point of his collegiate film was his pass protection. One more running back note. I've got snap rates for running backs in the red zone. The 100% club is Saquon Barkley, Bucky Irving, Ashton Genty, Chuba Hubbard, Kyron Williams, Chase Brown, Christian McCaffrey, Jalen Warren, and Jordan Mason. Those are the running backs who were on the field for every snap in the red zone in week 1. Some low rates. Cam Scatterbu's was 17%. I think that's going to increase. He did have 1 attempt in the red zone. Tracy didn't get any attempts in the red zone, but it was a 50% snap rate for Tracy. Just surprised me. I thought maybe Scatterbu's rate was higher because I kind of thought that was the role. I saw that he had the pass protection rep in the red zone. I think he can take that role at some point this year. 33% red zone snap rate for Dylan Sampson, so I wouldn't expect him to be involved there very much when Quinshon Judkins is integrated into the offense. And then 36% for Breece Hall stood out to me. Yeah, I want the role to be better. You can't complain about Breece coming out and looking phenomenal in week 1, putting points on the board, and the Jets just looking so good. Overall, really, really encouraged by what we saw from Tanner Engstrand. But some of the underlying metrics here in terms of usage for Breece aren't exactly where you'd like to see them. Alrighty, let's run through some wide receiver notes in terms of efficacy, and then we're going to take a break and get back with the usage notes. So I've got the average separation scores and the route win rates, courtesy of Fantasy Points Data's charting. I think some of this is important to bring up, like Devontae Adams, wide receiver 2 in average separation score in week 1. I know it wasn't a huge, performance in the fantasy point column, but the underlying stuff looks like he continues to be elite. A few other receivers who stood out as elite in average separation score in week 1. And keep in mind that it's a small sample size and lots of things affect this. Defense affects this, coverage affects this, and not just coverage efficacy, but also like coverage types. Defenses sending more coverage to other players. For example, Jalen Naylor had an amazing average separation score, higher than Devontae Adams. But like a lot of that is because defenses are so concerned with stopping Justin Jefferson. But yeah, the other elite receivers in average separation score in week 1, Zay Flowers. I'm going to give you the top end guys first. Zay Flowers, Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, Ladd McConkey, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, and Nico Collins. So not worried about any of those guys, even if they had a rough week 1. The next group here is actually like players who are in a similar range in terms of average separation score, but aren't, the household names. Just some interesting ones that stood out to me. Cedric Tillman really looked good. Obviously had a big game as well, and people are getting excited about Tillman. But man, he continues to improve. It seems like was a pretty interesting prospect, and seems to have like only continued to improve year over year. I don't want to be like Nico Collins, but like that's archetypically kind of what he looks like. He's just not the athlete that Nico is. But in terms of refining his game and continuing to improve, only encouraging signs so far. Dante Thornton for the Raiders. Really, all of the Raiders looked really, really good. Like Trey Tucker actually had a better rate than Thornton, but Thornton's rate was really good. And that is intriguing because he is 6'5" and runs a 4.3. Calvin Austin for the Steelers wasn't just the production. It wasn't just all the offseason talk. It wasn't just, the years prior where we've seen Austin look like a pretty freaking good player. In week 1, his average separation score, one of the best. So keep an eye on this little dude. He is freaking awesome. Romeo Doubs for the Packers. Only didn't run enough routes to actually qualify, but did have the highest average separation score in the league in week 1, followed by Jalen Naylor. I'm going to give you some route win rates. We're going to take a break. This is just a route win rate rundown. I'm going to give you anybody that stood out to me on the high and low end. 40% for Mike Evans is unbelievably good. Absolutely still has it. 39% Justin Jefferson, 35% Devontae Adams, 32% Zay Flowers, 31% Cedric Tillman, 31% Quinton Johnston, 29% Ladd McConkey, 26% Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb also at 26%, Drake London at 25%, Brock Bowers at 22% in this elite wide receiver group. And again, I said the whole Raiders offense looks good. Still, tight ends don't really get up into this range. Maybe he's kind of a special guy. Maybe he's a little different than tight ends. 21% Calvin Austin, 20% Alec Ayamanor. Compare that to 7% for Calvin Ridley, who had almost 7 drops in this game, it felt like. It was rough. So that is interesting for the Titans round 4 rookie. That's the first rookie that I've named, you might notice. 19% for Emeka Egbuka, 19% for Jackson Smith-Njigba, 19% for Jalen Waddle compared to 5% for Tyreek Hill, 19% for Roma Dunze compared to 9% for DJ Moore, 19% for George Pickens, 17% for Nico Collins and Cortland Sutton, 16% for Jamar Chase, 15% for Kayshon Boutte, 14% Tedero McMillan, Puka Nacua, 13% Garrett Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, the Sun God, Torrey Horton, T. Higgins, and Troy Franklin, 12% Marvin Harrison Jr., and then some that concern me a little bit here, 11% DK Metcalf, who also had a negative separation score. I thought the scheme looked pretty good overall. We'll talk about that more later, but the average separation score stuff stood out to me, kind of what I've seen from DK. 10% win rate for Cooper Kupp, who also had a negative average separation score. 7% for Terry McLaurin, negative separation score for him as well. I think we'll see him improve, but it is just tough to miss time early on. 0% for Keon Coleman. You maybe have seen that floating around on Twitter. Let me find this tweet and share this because this is a good one to note as we wrap up this conversation about average separation scores. 0% for Keon Coleman, 0% for A.J. Brown, 0% for Travis Hunter. We're going to talk about those players later. Definitely some interesting stuff going on with A.J. Brown. Only 2% for Jamison Williams and 3% for Chris Olave. And that one I've got my eye on because he's been phenomenal in this metric in the past. And Rashid Shaheed had a 10% rate. Okay, if I can share my screen here. Josh, I've got this tweet from Stephen O'Rourke, and he gives you a bunch of information on what win rate is, how this is calculated. They're trying to delineate between like what the defense is giving a player and what the player is creating on their own. And so it's relevant for Keon Coleman here because there were several routes where he ran the right route, found a hole in his zone, was open, presented an open target. So is that why? How does he have a 0% rate then? Go check this out if you're interested. It's a really good breakdown. All right, let's take another break, and we'll get back with some wide receiver usage notes.
Get ready.
Wait a second. I thought we were going tubing.
All 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and Knuckles are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
And everyone loves it.
Every adventure,
Just try to keep up.
every face-off,
This ends now.
and every moment that will have you saying,
Where have you been? My entire life!
It's showtime.
all 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the entire Sonic universe are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, wide receiver notes for you. I'm going to first give you the XFP leaders for week 1. Malik Neighbors and Drake London, both above 28 in terms of XFP, but both below 10 in terms of actual FP. I know that's frustrating, but man, the role is so good for those guys. Both of them had a first read target rate above 45%. Drake London, before he got hurt, had a 42% target share. I'm not worried about him at all. I thought the offense gave us a lot of encouraging signals. Neighbors, quarterback play was rough, for sure. But the role continues to be amazing for these two players, and we know why they're getting so many targets, because they're freaking awesome. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 3 in XFP. Marquise Brown, wide receiver 4. So if you picked up Marquise Brown, this is why. Like, the role is truly like elite wide receiver stuff. I mean, he had more expected fantasy points than Jackson Smith and Jigba, who had 90% of his team's air yards and had a huge game, 124 yards. But really, they were just force feeding Marquise Brown the ball, because what else are they going to do? Chris Olave at wide receiver 6 here in terms of expected fantasy points. We'll talk about the Saints more. Really like a surprisingly healthy offensive environment here. Maybe that has more to do with the Cardinals defense than the Saints. But I thought the Cardinals defense would be better this year. So I don't know. That's interesting. I've got my eye on the Saints. Keon Coleman, wide receiver 7, the only other receiver above 20 expected fantasy points. They're not going to, throw this many times, create this many plays, maybe again all season. But the fact that Coleman could get to this, 11 targets career high is definitely noteworthy. Juwan Johnson is next with an XFP number of 20. So he's up here in this elite wide receiver range. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. It was, everything you wanted, targets, air yards, everything was there for Juwan Johnson. Cortland Sutton is next. I'm going to share my screen and give this to you guys. Cortland Sutton at wide receiver 8. Rashid Shaheed followed him there. So in the top 10 in terms of XFP, among all wide receivers and tight ends in week 1, we have 3 Saints. That was not on anybody's bingo card. Wan'Dale Robinson, love to see it. Ricky Pearsall is wide receiver 11. Puka Nacua is next in XFP. Then we got Zay Flowers, Debo Samuel, Teteroa McMillan, Rome Odunze. The role was great for him. Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin are next. You've maybe seen Adam Azer tweeting about how this was really an unprecedented week here for the rookie. tight ends. These two had the single highest target per route run rates of any tight end in their first game during the time that we have that data available. That, of course, includes Brock Bowers. That includes 1,000 yards in his rookie season, Kyle Pitts. And then you see XFP telling a similar story. Tight end 2, Tyler Warren. Tight end 3, Harold Fannin Jr., ahead of some guys who had really, big games in week 1 at wide receiver. So this is the whole list. You gotta check out Fantasy Points data. You can look at all this stuff. I've got like first read target rates and everything. We're gonna get into that as I go team by team. Okay. A couple other things that wide receiver wanted to throw out for you. Players who had multiple end zone targets in week 1 were Quentin Johnston, Drake London, Slick Rick, Ricky Pearsall. I cannot be more excited about Ricky Pearsall. Everything is there as long as Brock Purdy is able to, suit up. Keon Coleman and Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas, had 2 end zone targets. Everyone there scored a touchdown except for Pearsall and London. Pearsall was so close. Like Shanahan drew a cool little in and out, like pre-snap motion where he's going behind the line and then is in motion at the snap going out to the right side, and just barely the DB got a fingertip on that one. Could have easily been an even bigger game for Pearsall. So he's got, the downfield looks and the end zone looks, just a really, really high upside role. And we probably are only going to see that increase. But I don't know how many times I'm going to say this. We'll get to that later. I have notes on the Niners without George Kittle that I think are pretty interesting. All right, last thing I want to share here in relation to wide receivers and tight ends before we go team by team. I've got a thread that I put together that I think is pretty cool. I'm going to add to this. I really only briefly got to get it started. There's more notes to throw in. It's a thread just looking at route break types. So we're talking about horizontally breaking routes or vertically breaking routes, which are exactly what they sound like. Vertically breaking, you're going deep, you're coming back to the ball, you're working on a vertical plane. Horizontally breaking routes, work on the horizontally breaking plane. So ins, outs, slants, stuff like that. Horizontally breaking routes were 49% more likely to draw a target than vertically breaking routes in 2024. They were worth 23% more fantasy points. So it's not the vertically breaking routes are bad. There's a lot of upside with them, especially if you're good, especially if your offense can support that type of a throw. Nico Collins has crushed on these in the past. But horizontally breaking routes are also good, maybe better, because they give you such a higher probability of drawing a target. So I do think that this can be a huge edge for you in fantasy football. This is all available over in the data suite. Gave you a few situations here that stood out to me in my initial look at it. The Raiders, first off, just couldn't have been a more encouraging, week 1 from Chip Kelly. Everything was there. The pace of play was there. And then this is a huge note too. Jacoby Myers, as the wide receiver 1 for the Raiders last year, had a 37% horizontally breaking route rate, which I think is basically right around average for a wide receiver 1, maybe a little bit below average. It was 50% in week 1 in the first game with Chip Kelly. Brock Bowers last year had a 35% rate. I think a lot of what he did as a rookie was more static stuff, more just like, just stop routes, just like finding little holes in zones. That's the type of coverage that they saw a ton of last year, was just like cloud coverage, just way back for you to throw it to Brock Bowers 5 yards down the field, and then we're all going to come tackle him because he can't beat us all. I think things might be different this year. I think that Ashton Jeanty, at least in week 1, it's a really aggressive Patriots defense that blitzes a lot, uses a lot of man coverage and stuff like that. So I think naturally the Patriots are going to use more single high safety coverage than most teams, but still their single high safety coverage rate in week 1 was ridiculous against the Raiders. It was like 70%. It was easily the highest in the NFL. And if we're going to give Brock Bowers looks against those types of coverages, like I think we're going to see him absolutely smash, get way more one-on-one looks, get way more wins with the ball in his hand, create more explosive plays. And especially if we continue to see anything near the horizontally breaking route rate that Bowers had in week 1, which was 57%, up from 35% last year. I think it sets up so well. These were by far the highest win rate route for Bowers was horizontally breaking routes. That was where he's at his best. If you watch the guy, like, makes sense. I've heard him compared to Puka Nacua in terms of the way that he plays and runs routes and wins. And it's like, yeah, on that horizontally breaking plane, like, he is a handful. So really encouraging stuff in terms of the route designs for the Raiders in week 1. And I think that had a lot to do with why they had such high average separation scores. Of course, all this does remain contingent until we see more on the fact that they played a soft matchup. Not a soft matchup for the Dallas Cowboys in week 1. George Pickens did not produce, but I think things could change there. So in week 1, Brian Schottenheimer used a lot more of these horizontally breaking routes than last year's Cowboys. It really surprised me last year when I looked at wide receivers who had low H-break routes, but were still productive. It was, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, players you might expect because they were just being sent deep so often. I didn't expect to see CeeDee Lamb in that group. He had a 34% horizontally breaking route rate last year. That was up to 39% in week 1, so that's a good note for him. George Pickens had a 53% rate in week 1, which really surprised me. He had a higher win rate on these routes than Lamb. I love reading these tweets sometimes. I think I had too much coffee when I was writing this. Definitely, really intrigued by this. I don't expect that we will see his rate above 50% going forward. But to me, it makes more sense to use him on the vertical plane. But the fact that Schottenheimer is doing more designs like this just has me really intrigued about the wide receivers overall. And here I've got the win rates for the two of them. Pickens actually was charted as having a slightly higher win rate on his horizontally breaking routes than CeeDee Lamb did. So don't panic, is where I'm at with Pickens. Of course, Kyle Shanahan, going to put his guy in advantageous situations. We saw a 48% horizontally breaking route rate for Ricky Pearsall in week 1. One of many, many encouraging data points for Ricky Pearsall. And man, watching the film, it's like, yeah, good luck trying to keep up with him on the horizontally breaking routes. He is really agile. Devontae Adams, maybe contributing to his high scores here in terms of average separation. It's good to be paired up with Sean McVay. We've seen that time and time again. It's good to be paired up with Matthew Stafford too. So hopefully this is sustainable in terms of the usage and then also the health for Stafford, because Devontae Adams had a 38% horizontally breaking route rate last year. That was up to 54% in week 1, his first game with Sean McVay. And he cooked 50% win rate on those routes, highest average separation score on those routes among qualified players in week 1. So I think better days are ahead. One last note here on horizontally breaking routes. David Njoku's usage did change. He was out there running a lot of routes, but not a lot of routes that seemed like they were designed to get the ball in his hands. That included the H-break route rate dropping from 22% down to 14%. Meanwhile, Harold Fannin had a 33% rate. So I do think it's wheels up for our guy, Harold Fannin. You love to see it. You love to see it. All right, where are we at next? Oh, it's time to go team by team for sure. Let me take a quick ad break, and then we're going to get back, and I'll give you all the good stuff, team by team, all the good information here.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
That is a rookie mistake.
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
The crowd loves champions. Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
To amuse you is my only wish.
Glory is yours, not mine.
Very good. Gladiator 2, rated R, now streaming on Paramount Plus.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
That is a rookie mistake.
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Critics agree Landman is a hit.
We roll the dice one last time.
Men die. Oil companies don't.
Alrighty, I'm back. We're gonna go team by team. I've got like offensive environment stuff for you. I've got some key stats for you with each team, and then I also want to get into the usage for the running backs and the receivers on each team. Give you an idea of how things were split up in week 1. That is all going to be the fantasy points data suite that we're leaning on. So starting with the Arizona Cardinals here. 18th in plays in week 1, offensive plays, 276 yards of offense, ranked 20th. The key stat I've got for the Cardinals is they were 25th in rushing success rate and 28th in overall success rate. This is a team that we've seen run the ball very successfully in the past, but they weren't able to get it going much in week 1, and still it was an okay offensive day. A couple other notes, they were 2nd in screenplays in week 1. Marvin Harrison Jr. was charted with 3 screen routes. He was targeted on one of them. He did not have a single screen target last year. The other one I've got, this one blew my mind, 60 catchable air yards for the Arizona Cardinals. In week 1, 60 catchable air yards for the whole team was last in the NFL. And still, it was a decent, offensive output, a respectable offensive output overall. So I just want to, again, defend Drew Petzing. Like, don't talk to me about Drew Petzing if you don't know ball, dude. Like, league low 60 catchable air yards from Kyler Murray. And still, like, Marvin Harrison had an okay day, like we're getting, 12 points from James Conner, even in this environment. It's so clear, I feel like, what is the limiting factor for Arizona. We had a 60% catchable ball rate on throws of 5 or more yards from a clean pocket. Not good. 60% is not good. I know it's been a while since most of us have been in school, but that is a D-. QB 28 is where Kyler Murray ranked in that stat. So here's the usage for the running backs in week 1. We've got a 64% snap rate for James Conner, 34% for Trey Benson, 12 rushes for Conner, 8 for Benson, 46% route rate for Conner, 30% for Benson. They were rotating drives, which I think is what we can expect going forward. I think we're going to see more Benson than we did last year, where he was pretty much strictly a handcuff. But at the same time, Conner has been one of the most effective running backs in the NFL over the past couple of seasons. That's backed by data, that's backed by film. If you watch the guy, he's just awesome. So if Benson gives them, it's almost like the Seahawks backfield, where if Benson is doing too much of the Kenneth Walker stuff and not getting successful plays, and Conner is like the souped up version of Zach Charbonnet and is always giving them successful plays, I think we'll probably see the backfield just kind of shift more towards Conner. That's what we saw last year. I'm not trying to speak that into existence or nothing. I don't really care. Don't have any investment in this, but like that wouldn't surprise me at all. I mostly see Benson as somebody who you can stash. I'm not hoping to trust him at any point this season, barring a Conner injury. Here's the usage for the receivers and tight ends for Arizona. So we've got a 30% first read target rate for Trey McBride. That's pretty standard stuff here. 22% for Marvin Harrison Jr. It's pretty much all funneled through these two. I liked the usage overall. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s horizontally breaking route rate was up. We've seen that trend continue to develop for him. Love to see him get a target over the middle on that touchdown. I'm content with where MHJ is ranked, even though I do think Kyler is a limiting factor. I think he's continuing to progress as a player, And the usage is good enough here where it's like just him and Trey McBride getting targets, that I think he's probably going to continue to be a really good player for fantasy. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons were 3rd in plays in week 1. They were 10th in yards. So I think we're going to see this continue for the Falcons. A lot of plays under Zach Robinson play at a quick pace. And what we saw last year from this Falcons team was that they were really effective at moving the ball on the ground. They had the highest success rate in the NFL, 49% success rate on running back runs last year. That was down to 29th in week 1, 23% success rate on running back runs in week 1, and still created 70 plays of offense, 3rd in the NFL, 358 yards of offense. So that is just really encouraging to me because I think we're going to see better days ahead for this running game. I don't really know. I mean, the line is a little bit banged up, but I don't think we're going to see some massive regression from what we saw last year. So if the consistency is there and we start to get explosive plays, which just has been lacking for Bijan Robinson, that was so fun to see, like right away, like 50-yard touch. Or he's like, oh, he can make explosive plays. This super athletic guy can make explosive plays. That's going to help out the offense a lot. Another thing that could help out the offense, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts looked good. Dan brought it up on the Monday show with Adam, and we kind of laughed him off. But man, the more I dig into it, all the data supports it. He was top 5, I believe, in tight end in win rate on his routes among tight ends. PFF had him graded as the 3rd best tight end in week 1 behind only Brock Bowers and Tyler Warren. And then I turn on the film and it's like, yeah, he did. Like you watch it on Sunday and it's easy. There's so much high flying stuff going on with red zone and everything. You don't want to give into like sensationalism, but it's like, he does look better. And then I watched every round. And it's like, yeah, he legitimately is moving better. They used him in pre-snap motion 10 times in week 1, which was the 2nd highest of any player in the NFL in week 1. And he was targeted twice on those motion routes. So those are way up from what we've seen in the past for Pitts, and is definitely something that could boost his value, especially if these receivers don't get back healthy. But I hope that we're going to see London and Mooney back on the field together soon. So I don't want to get carried away with it. I would rather roster Harold Fannin Jr. than Pitts, but pretty fun week 1. Like it might, he's still super young. He had 2 missed tackles forced, just like throwing guys down. On the screen here, you'll find, I already referenced Drake London, 47% first read target rate. So it's hard for anybody else to really see much usage here. But that's Casey Washington. Yeah. 91 air yards for Casey Washington. I watched the film for like Michael Penix and I was just amazed at how often he was airing it out to Casey Washington. I don't think he's going to be relevant. I think that's more of a Darnell Mooney note. I think Mooney could put up some big numbers when he gets back. As far as the running backs, it's pretty much, just Bijan's backfield, I think, going forward. 23 XFP for him, 7 for Tyler Algier. They split the carries, more evenly than maybe people wanted, but that's actually what they did against Tampa Bay last year too. I think much more important is this freaking 77% route rate for Bijan Robinson. That is really, really elite. Moving on, Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry, the chart breaker of all chart breakers, 30 fantasy points, but only 10 XFP. He does not care for the nerds or their models. He just goes out and puts points on the board. 18 of 21 running back rush attempts for Derrick Henry. And not a whole lot in the passing game in a game where the Ravens just didn't have very many plays. But if you look at the underlying usage metrics, I think there's some interesting takeaways here. 53% first read target rate for Zay Flowers. I think, if they get into games where there are more total plays, we could see Zay Flowers be a lot better of a fantasy asset than he's been. Because I think what this looks like to me is that he continues to level up. Like from year 1 to year 2, all of his rates across the board increased in terms of his ability to draw targets, but also his ability to convert targets into efficiency. And then even from the front half of year 2 to the back half of year 2, he also made tangible improvement to his efficiency, to his target drawing. And then we see him come out in week 1 and have a 47% target share, create a bunch of yak, convert in the end zone, which is something we don't ever really see from him. My notes on the Ravens, they were 27th in plays. So like I said, I think with more plays, this team could give us more volume for these receivers, where even Rashad Bateman is starting to be relevant and Mark Andrews has better days than we saw here. For even while ranking 27th in plays, 432 yards is the second most, behind only Bills. So that's the thing when you're creating tons of explosive plays. They had the highest explosive play rate of any team in week one. You're not going to have a lot of total plays. And so it's not like it was a bad week for offensive environment, obviously. But if you're looking for like actual receptions and stuff like that, you're just going to need more plays than 19 dropbacks or whatever it was for Baltimore here. Key stat on the Ravens, their pre-snap motion rate was up 58%, up from 51% last year. They averaged a league high 10.5 yards per play on plays involving pre-snap motion. All 5 touchdowns for the Ravens came on plays with pre-snap motion. So I think that Todd Monken just continues to elevate as a play caller. I think it's just wheels up. Everything we saw last year for the Ravens feels like it's on track here. Buffalo Bills, first in offensive plays, first in yards, 497 yards of offense. Key stat on the Bills, 25% of plays involved 2 or more tight ends on the field. Last year, the league average was 30%. In week one, Bills' rate was only 23%. So nothing really changing here for Dalton Kincaid. Dawson Knox outsnapped Dalton Kincaid, even in a game where the Bills played from behind and dropped back to pass 51 times. Still, we saw more Dawson Knox than Dalton Kincaid. I would definitely rather have Harold Fannin Jr. than Dalton Kincaid. Maybe it's crazy, but I feel like you can almost take Juwan Johnson over him. There's more upside with Kincaid to score touchdowns, but like, man, there's going to be weeks. There's going to be weeks where he probably gives you 0, like the role is just frustrating. I mean, at least last year, they were really kind of force-feeding Kincaid targets when he was on the field. But man, his target per route run rate was really low in week one. His first read target rate was only 12%. So I've got the first read target rates on the screen here. It's 35% for Keon Coleman, 15% for Josh Palmer, 12% for Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. It's not a role that is conducive to fantasy success, even in this big game. Like if he didn't get the touchdown, it wasn't going to be a good day. On the ground, pretty much exactly what we've seen, except Ray Davis kind of had his role scaled back. But 58% snap rate for James Cook. 5 targets is great, but 46% route rate doesn't suggest that anything has changed for him as a receiver. I think it was mostly just that there were a ton of plays for the Bills. Carolina Panthers, 18 in plays, 255 yards of offense, ranked 25th though. So not a great day for the Panthers overall. The key stat here, 12 of 21 touches went to Chuba Hubbard in the first half. Hubbard had a 76% snap rate in the first half. He was the only running back to touch the ball in the first half. In the second half, playing from behind here, 56% snap rate for Hubbard, 44% for Dowdle. I think it's good that it's like, this is exactly who we saw last year. The Hubbard or the Dowdle signing didn't signify any real change. Dowdle seems like he's just going to play on passing downs, and it's possible that he might even lose that. In the second half, 8 opportunities went to Hubbard, 6 went to Dowdle, the last of which was a drop that deflected off of Dowdle's hands and into the air for an interception. So we'll see. Maybe things shift over to Trevor Etienne, or maybe they do trust Hubbard with more route running and pass blocking and receiving. He had 5 targets in this game. He had a 40% route rate, which is okay. That's higher than Breece Hall's was. That's higher than Rico Dowdle's was. I feel overall really encouraged, especially if the Panthers are able to play better. I think the Jaguars defense might be better than people expect. We'll see. Defensive coordinator change there. But yeah, when the game was, when all things were equal and the Panthers were trying to play the way that they would like to, it was like all Hubbard. 12 out of 21 touches. I mean, I gave you that list earlier with Chase Brown at 60%. There were not very many running backs above 50% of the offensive touches, but Hubbard was before things got out of hand. Chicago Bears are next. We've got the Bears at 11th in offensive plays in week one, 317 yards of offense in the first Ben Johnson game. That's 14th in week one. Key stat for the Bears was they had an 88% zone run rate. Only the Jets were higher. No one else is above 75%. So I'm talking about the types of runs, the scheme that they were using when running. 88% of their runs were inside or outside zone. 71% of their total runs were outside zone runs. So we've seen Ben Johnson shift more and more to outside zone during his time with Detroit. That was his specialty. But 71% is crazy. I think there was only one team above 60% last year, was the Atlanta Falcons. So that's a really high rate. Feels a bit predictable. And we did see the Bears rank dead last in running back success rate on runs. It was a pretty rough week for DeAndre Swift. He was bottom 5 in rushing yards over expectation. But the role was great. And the matchup was tough. Minnesota is not an easy team to run on, lots of blitzes. They're able to find those holes on those zone schemes and fill them. So if he keeps the role and the efficiency improves, you see this XFP number here is 18.2. DeAndre Swift could definitely give you much better fantasy days. 79% snap rate, only 14% of the snaps went to Kyle Monangai. 17 rush attempts to Swift, not a single one for anyone else in the backfield. 5 targets for Swift, 61% route rate for Swift. That's all like clearly RB1 stuff. We'll see how long he holds on to it. He's got to play better. In terms of the passing game, you'd love to see 33% first 3 target rate for Olamide Zaccheaus. He's not a bad player, and they really seem to like him. They talked about him this offseason, this preseason. They talked about him a lot. He got some downfield targets even, which surprised me. He was their primary slot player, 67% slot rate for Zaccheaus compared to 43% for DJ Moore and 33% for Rome Odunze. Odunze is the one who I'm the most interested in here. It looked like just clear wide receiver 1 stuff for Odunze. 28% first read target rate for Odunze. They moved him around a lot. I read Matt Harmon, read his reception perception charting. He's doing more reception perception charting during the season this year, which is awesome. And Odunze was one of the few guys that he got to. He also got to AJ Brown. We'll get to that later. On Odunze, he liked that he was getting more looks over the middle, but he felt like, Caleb needed to do a better job hitting those looks, going to those looks. I even compared him to Kyler Murray in that regard. I think that's fair. Like there are some areas of Caleb's game that just need to improve. The accuracy was bad in this game. There were definitely like several sprays where he's just throwing the ball too hard. And then there's also these plays where he's not like willing to take that shot over the middle to Odunze, who I thought had a great game. The separation scores back that up as well. So it might be hit or miss with Odunze, depending on the QB play. But overall, especially relative to like the range of outcomes here, this is probably like a 65th percentile outcome for the Bears offense and what we could have expected from Caleb and like a first-time play caller. I thought overall it was pretty encouraging. And then when you look at, the usage here as well for Odunze, 17 XFP and the first 3 target rates to back it up. And it's not only the deep stuff. It's not only, hey, go out at X receiver and be a winner for us because we need you to do that, and then we're going to scheme up stuff to Luther Burden and DJ Moore. They got them all. They were moving everybody around. And so that's pretty cool. I think Odunze is probably one of the biggest risers at wide receiver after week 1. Cincinnati Bengals are next, and what a week it was for those Bengals. I really don't have anything insightful for you. They have struggled against the Browns. Jim Schwartz pitched a good game, and the Bengals, had 141 yards of offense. They were 30th in plays, 31st in offense. 63% of the offensive touches went to Chase Brown. I think everything is as expected going forward. Chase Brown's the workhorse. Offense funnels through these 2 guys, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I guess one notable change here is Noah Fant was more involved than I expected. He cut into Gesicki's role. I wasn't more than I would have expected. So if you were counting on Gesicki in some deep leagues, I think you might need to find a different plan there. Joe Burrow played fine, played pretty good. If you look at all the accuracy notes, checked out pretty well. The Browns defense was awesome. I mean, and we know that they have the ability to be awesome. So that's the main takeaway for me. On to the Browns. Cleveland Browns here. We've got a 45% snap rate for Dylan Sampson compared to 52% for Jerome Ford, but way more touches for Sampson, 12 rush attempts compared to 6 for Ford and 3 for Rocket Sanders, our guy, 8 targets for Dylan Sampson. But Ford was on the field more in passing situations. I expected that to be the case. I think the 8 targets are probably a bit fluky, but he's a playmaker. Like we saw that in college, and we saw that here in week 1. Given the relative performance of the two, I would only expect that we're probably going to see more Sampson and less Ford moving forward. In terms of the passing game, 28% first read target rate for Jerry Jeudy, 24% for Harold Fannin, 24% for Cedric Tillman, and only 8% for David Njoku. So that is not what you want to see. You do see that they've got him charted with 2 missed tackles forced here, 1 for Harold Fannin. Better days could be ahead for Njoku. He still had the route rate. We've got 79% for Njoku, 60% for Harold Fannin. I think if you've got Njoku, all you can really do is hold. If somebody dropped him, I'm totally content picking him up. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he outscores Fannin rest of season. But it was not what you wanted to see. The screens were going to Fannin instead of Njoku. And like I said, with the horizontally breaking route stuff at the top of the show, there were plenty of reasons to be worried about Njoku. Oh yeah, I actually do have a cool stat on the Browns. They used a lot of pre-snap motion. This was honestly, I almost forgot this, but this was one of the biggest takeaways for me from week 1 for any team. Kevin Stefanski's offense was just way different than we've seen in the past. So they used a lot of pre-snap motion. They also used a lot of 2 tight end sets. We haven't really seen them do that all that often in the past. What was 38% pre-snap motion rate in 2024? That was at 70%. The second highest rate of any offense in week 1 was the pre-snap motion rate for the Cleveland Browns. If you're watching on the screen here, you see 6 pre-snap motion routes for Harold Fannin, 6 for Cedric Tillman, 4 for Isaiah Bond, 4 for David Njoku. Tillman was only used in pre-snap motion 13 times across 11 games in 2024. So this is a huge change from what we've seen from the Browns in the past. And it's kind of like what I was just talking about with Odunze, where Tillman has been just a go win outside against the opponent's best cornerback kind of receiver. And so if he's used in more creative ways, that's pretty interesting because he's been a good player. Like the fact that he's even on our fantasy radar when he's been on the Browns and been asked to go win against the opponent's best cornerback is definitely noteworthy, right? And so, yeah, let's see. Maybe they've taken note. Maybe Stefanski is going to get him involved in some more interesting ways. Dallas Cowboys, 3rd in plays and 17th in yards. I don't think that's right in terms of plays. Sorry, because they ran 56 plays, which I've got noted was down from last year. Last year, they ran 65 plays per game, which was 4th, but only 56 plays in week 1 and 307 yards of offense. So right in the middle of the pack. I think, like I said, better days are ahead. We saw the increase in horizontally breaking routes. And then we also saw a lot more motion and play action in Brian Schottenheimer's first game here. And so that's all encouraging to me. The only thing I think that was dragging the plays down was that this game was just slow paced against the Eagles. Rich Rebar on Twitter did point out that the way the Cowboys are playing defense now might be a bit of a bummer for those of us who are like, maybe they're this year's Bengals, because they're playing very conservative, a lot of just dropping back into deep zones and letting teams beat them with methodical drives, inviting teams to run and do short passing and stuff like that. And so that, especially in a game like this against the Eagles, where it becomes very pronounced, that's going to lead to slower games with fewer plays. And that's not what we want to see. We want to see, for shootout purposes, we want to see teams beating the Cowboys over the top and getting into back and forth games. And we might. It's just 1 week. But that is an interesting note from Reeves, who is digging into all this stuff at a high level. As far as the backfield, freaking 80% snap rate for Javonte Williams, 15 out of 19 rush attempts. Really wild stuff there. Of course, Miles Sanders had the fumble after the big run. So we could see Javonte just truly top 20 running back most weeks if this is the role. The Cowboys, I mean, like first drive, they're coming out running. And I think again, it's the Eagles' defense. That's probably the way you want to attack them. But I really thought we were going to see more passing from this team. But Javonte looked pretty good. If you look at rushing over expectation, he looks really good there. I thought I said earlier he had 93% of his runs got positive yards, and this might just be a different version of the Cowboys than we were expecting. Here's the receiving metrics here. 91% route rate for Pickens. Ferguson at 77%. That's solid. Classic here, 5.8 yards. Average depth of target for Ferguson. Healthy first read target rate for Ferguson. I do think matchup probably had something to do with that against all the zone cover to the Eagles. 46% first read target rate for CeeDee Lamb. Only 14% for Pickens. We're going to need to see that scale up for Pickens if he's going to give us the upside case that we were hoping for, Dan and I, when we made him our top value at any ADP this draft season. Definitely not giving up on Pickens yet. Denver Broncos, 3rd in plays, 14th in yards. It was a weird game from Bo Nix, but overall, Sean Payton's still able to engineer a pretty good offensive day, 317 yards of offense. Key stat for the Broncos, they were 2nd in pass rate over expectation in the first half. So this is, again, fantasy points data. They're looking at, on the circumstances of any given play, what might be expected, what's most likely. And then what we actually got was a lot more passing from the Broncos. I'm not really sure if that's going to stick. They were pretty high in this metric last year. They were top 10. But to be 2nd coming out of the gate is interesting. I did just want to make note of which teams were aggressive and wanting to pass early on, and they were one of them. 37% of passes involved play action for the Broncos. Only the Colts and the Vikings had a higher rate. And this is something we've seen from Sean Payton. This is something that I've highlighted in reference to the running back position specifically. Running back targets coming off play action are a lot more efficient than checkdowns. And we saw right away them, focus on the running backs in the play action game. That's something we've seen in the past as well. Over the past 2 seasons, Javonte Williams leads all running backs in play action targets as a member of the Broncos. And it really isn't very close between him and 2nd and 3rd place. In week 1, RJ Harvey got a play action target. J.K. Dobbins got 2 play action targets. Tyler Bidet got a play action target. He also received 2 screens. So here's the running back breakdown. We've got 17% snap rate for Bidet. His role shrank in the second half. 31% for Harvey, 52% for Dobbins. 16 rush attempts for Dobbins compared to 6 for Harvey. Harvey did tie Bidet with the most routes run on the team. But you see this XFP number here is not high. 4.4 expected fantasy points for Harvey in this role. So for the time being, he's probably just got to hit your bench. Sorry if you were hoping to start him early. I thought there was an outside shot that we might be able to, but it looks like it's going to be a lot of Dobbins. It might be like a post-buy type of rookie bump here for Harvey. In terms of the passing game, pretty much just Courtland Sutton. Yeah, 38% first read target rate for Sutton. Troy Franklin is out there. He is playing more than Marvin Mims, but yeah, 58%, 56% route rate for him, 51% for Mims. Evan Ingram got banged up, but even before that, his route rate was only at 40%. So it looks like, and it might just be a week 1 thing, but it looks like we kind of are seeing what we've seen from Payton in the past, where he's rotating a lot of players in. And so I don't know if you can really trust any of them. I did like to see Sutton's ADOT, average depth of target, down at 9 yards. Just a dependable role for him here, not just the deep stuff. I think he's truly come into his own as the wide receiver 1 for this offense. And so if we get better days from Bo Nix, I think we're going to see some huge numbers for Sutton. It was not a very good day for Nix. The accuracy checks, the accuracy proves that for sure. And then also just making some weird decisions for sure. So keep an eye on that, because that could crater a lot of the stuff that we've been excited about for the Sean Payton players. Detroit Lions had an awfully weird week 1. Not what we've come to expect from this team. 9th in plays, 27th in yards, 246 yards of offense. My key stat for the Lions, only 10.8% of offensive plays created 10 or more yards. So not very much explosiveness. During 3 years with Ben Johnson calling plays, they were only below 10% one time. And that was a game that Detroit cruised to a 52-14 win. The next lowest rate was 14%. It was at 10.8% in week 1. So way less explosive plays than we've seen from Ben Johnson. The Green Bay Packers defense was awesome this week, and they limit explosive plays. Even before they got Micah Parsons, that's what they were really good at. But still, Ben Johnson plays Green Bay every year, and this was the lowest rate that we've seen from this Lions offense in a long time. We're talking about 3 years with Ben Johnson. They had a rate above 20% in all 3 of those seasons, including his first season. 10.8% is really low. 25% success rate on running back runs. That was the 3rd lowest in the league. During the Ben Johnson era, 51 games, they were above 25% success rate on runs, running back runs in 49 of 51 games. So I am concerned in terms of like team level concern. This is probably top 5 for me from week 1. It's like Houston is above them, Miami is above them. Detroit's too talented to not expect better days, and they're not going to play the Packers every week. But man, there were a lot of reasons to worry. And probably the biggest is that Isaac Tesla only had a 5% first read target rate and didn't get to play. Seriously, though, I think they've got to get him in there because their other guys weren't winning. If you look at the route win rates, much lower than we've seen from Monterey St. Brown. Jameson Williams was only 2% charted route win rate. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about the Lions. I guess I'll hit on Sam Laporta again. The usage was good for Laporta. 29% of the air yards, team high. That is unusual. 23% of the targets, also team high. 29% of the first 3 targets. And I thought he looked good. I thought he looked healthier and more spry than he did last year. He did force a missed tackle. Good stuff there. Love to see it from Laporta. Running back usage leaned towards Gibbs, but I do think that was mostly because of the game script. When they fell behind, he got a lot more involved. But in the first half, they had pretty much an even snap rate. And Montgomery had more touches. So then you look at the second half, though, 76% snap rate for Gibbs, 70% route rate. Montgomery only played 27% of the snaps in the second half. So that, I think that probably means that Montgomery's someone you can use. And maybe Gibbs isn't, quite delivering on the top of round 1 draft status that he got. We'll see. Green Bay Packers are next. They were 31st in plays. So that is definitely contributing to Matthew Golden and anybody else here, Tucker Kraft. Volume was down across the board. 22nd in offensive yards. They really, really took their foot off of the gas pedal in the second half. And my key stat backs that up. They were 5th in pass rate over expectation in the first half. And so I think we might see this team pass more. I think we'll have hopefully a good test right away against the Commanders here in week 2. Because in week 1, what they wanted to do, it seemed like in the first half at least, they came out pretty aggressive passing the ball, 5th in pass rate over expectation. But that fell off in the second half. They ended up with a 53% rate of their plays facing a stacked box, a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets for the Packers. I don't think you need to overreact to the Matthew Golden stuff. I thought his tape looked great. I think we could see more from the Packers. If you want to buy, it's intriguing. It's the only thing that's giving me pause is the defense is so good that we might just see a lot of these types of games. This is against the freaking Lions, and they just went in there and did this, just bullied them. So we might just see them pack it up in the second half a lot. Houston Texans are next. The Texans were 21st in plays, 23rd in yards. My key stat on the Texans, it was a pretty boring day, but definitely notable that 81% of their plays had 3 or more receivers on the field. That was the highest rate in the NFL. And this is a team that uses a fullback. Only 10% of their plays use 2 or more tight ends. Only the Dolphins were lower. The league average is 33%. So that is a lot different than what we've seen from past Texans teams. And it might affect Nico Collins in terms of his efficiency and his target drawing ability. I think if Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel emerge as good players, which the route data in terms of their win rates look pretty good, especially for Higgins in week 1. If those guys emerge as good players, I think that helps Nico, but only if it's a healthy offensive environment, which it was a far cry from that in week 1. So if they can't protect, then I think having, more competition on the field is actually not going to help him. If they can protect, I think it's great to have more ways to stress the defense. But yeah, we saw Nico's target rates were much lower than they've really ever been. I'm pretty sure 25% first read target rate is the lowest he's ever been during a healthy game. And that's nobody else is like taking a commanding number here. It's just there's, when you have what we had in the past with Bobby Sloak, where it's a lot of play action, deep shots, and multiple tight ends on the field and stuff, everything funnels to him. And so he's, wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per route run in the NFL over the past 2 seasons. All of that is sort of affected by having fewer receivers on the field. So that's maybe one notable takeaway for the Texans. The biggest note is that, Nick Chubb actually looked pretty good. And so I think your Woody Marks bags like Dameon Pierce, if you were counting on any of that, you could probably just let it go. Chubb, he's not adding anything with elusiveness at this point. But the dude is got patience, and has got vision and all the things that have made him one of the most effective and efficient runners in the NFL over the past decade. Still absolutely has that and has the physicality to keep finishing forward. I was actually low-key kind of impressed with him, where it's okay, if they can protect, this can work. It's not fun or explosive, but this can keep them on track, and then they can hit the shots that they need to hit to their pass catchers. 49% snap rate for Chubb, only 21% route rate. He's not somebody that I think you want to use in fantasy. I think this is probably just the least valuable backfield for fantasy. Indianapolis Colts, we've got good stuff for Jonathan Taylor here, 58% route rate and 73% snap rate, but those are influenced by the blowout. If you look at just the first half, it's a 100% snap rate and a 60% route rate, 15 expected fantasy points in the first half alone. So, Christian McCaffrey was up at 30 XFP. Jonathan Taylor was on pace for that before he gave way to DJ Giddens. So looks like it's probably going to be a huge year for JT for as long as he's healthy. The Colts were 6th in plays and 4th in yards, 418 yards of offense for the Indianapolis Colts. That stuff is not probably sustainable, I'll do my best Dan impression here and say, no way. When it comes to Daniel Jones sustaining such an efficient offense, the Colts averaged 10 plays per drive, 10 offensive plays per drive. So we're talking about long, successful offensive drives here, all of them resulting in points. Dating back to 2000, there have only been 4 games where a team averaged 10 plays per drive. So that is fragile to me. I think it could fall apart where they have more drives that stall out, especially with Daniel Jones steering the ship. But clearly an improvement from what they've had at QB, where they can really keep drives sustained at all. So that's good to see. But I think so much of this is about Miami's defense, really. The last note I had on the Colts from a team level is that 40% of their passes involved play action. That was the highest rate in the league. It looks like RPO targets are back on the menu for Michael Pittman. That is what led to so many targets for Pittman. I think his targets are pushed up to 26, 27% just 2 years ago. And a lot of that was through the RPO design looks. On an RPO run pass option, there's really just one, maybe sometimes two targets available compared to a normal drop back game where you've got, 2, 3, 4 targets available in terms of reads that the quarterback can make. And so that just funnels more targets to the wide receiver one. You see a 30% first read target rate for Pittman here. 30% first read target rate for Tyler Warren. All of the Tyler Warren stuff looks great. 70% route rate is not at the range of like elite tight ends where he's being placed right now for fantasy. Everybody's very excited, but that could keep increasing, right? It was his first game as a rookie. I mean, Colston Loveland's route rate was like 40% or something like that. That's more typical for a rookie tight end. I think the fact that he's already at 70% is a good thing. They're designing lots of looks for Tyler Warren. Looked good out there. Looked great this preseason as well. Led the team in targets. It's very, very exciting for Warren. But of course, like all this team level stuff is probably going to come down. But 30% is 30%. So even if it does come down, like he's probably the most dependable piece of this passing game. Only 10% first read target rate for Josh Downs. Not what you want to see. Until we have more information, I think he's just got to be on your bench. 49% route rate, only 15% route rate for AD Mitchell. So unfortunately, for as much fun as those two are as route runners, they are just ideas for now. Not really players who you can use for fantasy. Jacksonville Jaguars, 11th in plays, 9th in offensive yards. All things considered, pretty good debut for Liam Cohen, Trevor could have been better, for sure. I would have liked to see more exciting stuff from Liam Cohen in terms of his route concepts and his play designs and play calling. But when you're just beating the crap out of a Panthers team that can barely move the ball, like, why would you, So, that's where we're at with the Jags. We didn't see any slants for BTJ. That was something I've talked about this summer, is that I'm excited to see more horizontally breaking routes for BTJ and Travis Hunter. I think that they can crush with those types of routes. Mike Evans last year with Liam Cohen was really, really good. I think he's wide receiver 2 in fantasy points on slants. And BTJ was wide receiver 1 in win rate on slants. So I want to see more of that. I think that we might see more of that coming, but so far it was pretty bland. So 88% route rate for BTJ, 76% for Travis Hunter, only 55 air yards for Travis Hunter. A lot of short stuff for him, working almost exclusively out of the slot, but the result was 8 targets. So not a bad day for Travis Hunter. Forced 2 missed tackles. It's just there's not very much upside in that role, but I trust Liam Cohen to continue to show us more creative ways to get these two involved. So I'm not overreacting yet. My key stat for the Jaguars is they averaged 7.4 yards per play with pre-snap motion. That was the 4th most. They averaged 3.6 yards per play with no motion, which was 25th. We saw 5 pre-snap motion routes for Travis Hunter, 4 for Diami Brown and Britton Strange, and 2 for Travis Etienne and BTJ. 3 screen targets for Hunter compared to 1 for BTJ, 1 for Etienne, and 1 for LaQuint Allen. So these are the Liam Cohen plays, the screens, the pre-snap motion, all that stuff. It seems like first indication is we're going to see that really benefit Travis Hunter. And it's also good to see the running backs involved in the screen game, because their screen game in Tampa Bay last year was like one of the best that we've seen over the past 5 years. So that's an Etienne stat. I mean, Etienne right now is looking like a top 15 or 20 running back on a week-to-week basis. With Tank Bigsby gone and like all of this work going to him and the potential for this too, the screens and the pre-snap motion design stuff. If Trevor Lawrence plays well, that can push the offense into more and more points. And we've seen, Etienne look pretty good. Like I said, running back 1 and rushing yards over expectation, creating big plays. Could be just like one of the steals of the draft. But if you've been around for very long at all, that my Bayshall Tootin bags are packed. And I do think that we're going to see him at the very least, we're going to see him come the midway point of the season. I think their bye week is week 8. So from that point on, I think he's going to be in at least a 50-50 split with ETN is how I'm projecting it. We saw him. He only got 3 rushes, but he like 2 of them came in the red zone. Like after that ETN long run, it was him that went out there and not Tank Bigsby. And the second of those 2 red zone rushes was actually after the 2-minute warning, so they had an opportunity to put ETN back in. But it was the rookie on the field. I think that's noteworthy. On the field, getting the ball in the first game of the season, in the first half, in the red zone. So then they trade Tank Bigsby away. I think they have a lot of confidence in him, and I think they should. 18 out of 19 runs this preseason got positive yards. Didn't have a single negative run. Man, the run that he had to cut back twice, one of his 3 runs this regular season game was so impressive. He got 9 yards where it was like blocked for -1 or 2. The usage-based stuff isn't there yet for our guy. Only a 6% snap rate, but I think he's going to be climbing soon. I think he's really good. Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs were 20th in offensive plays in week 1, 11th in offensive yards, 347 yards. Really a heroic effort from Mahomes to even get them there. With Xavier Worthy going down immediately, with no Jalen Royals, who I do believe they drafted to fill the Rashee Rice role, unfortunately dealing with a knee injury. And so what are we left with? Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquise Brown, Travis Kelce, Tyquan Thornton, 70% route rate for Thornton, average depth of target of 26 yards. And then you see everybody else here with an average depth of target below 7 yards. So it's just a weird offense right now. I think that we're going to see Brown force-fed the ball, but I also think the Eagles in week 2 have the pieces to just erase him. So what is going to work here in Kansas City? I think we're going to see the running backs more involved. But it's hard to feel confident about either of them. 7.5 expected fantasy points for Pacheco, 6 for Kareem Hunt, only a 30% route rate for Pacheco because Brashard Smith is getting involved. Kareem Hunt is getting involved. So really, I don't want to trust any of these options. I think Hollywood Brown, you pretty much just have to plug in. I think he's in my top 24 receivers this week. Kelce, I think Kelsey's probably the most logical answer for week 2 is that we see a lot more looks for Kelce. So you probably can start him. But yeah, man, overall, just not good stuff. The stat that stood out to me was all of the Chiefs players, all the Chiefs receivers had a route win rate below 10%. Travis Kelce had the highest route win rate at 11%. If you were listening earlier when I went through the route win rates, that's not good. Like I went through basically everybody who's above 10% and then got down to the players who I was worried about, who are all the ones below 10%. That's everyone on the Chiefs. So that's where we're at. If Jalen Royals gets back, he would legitimately be like one of the most interesting options, I think, on the waiver wire. So keep an eye out for that. All right. We're at basically the halfway point here. I'm going to take a quick break and get back. We'll talk about the Raiders, the Chargers, and the rest of the AFC West.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
That is a rookie mistake.
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Alrighty, the Raiders. Ashton Genty, just getting everything here. 86% snap rate, 19 out of 22 running back rush attempts. Was used a lot as a pass blocker. Tied Ramondre Stevenson for the most pass block snaps in the league at running back, and so his route rate was only 49%. I think we could see that increase, but maybe they're going to need him to play that role because the offensive line did struggle. If that rate increases, then it's like that's where you get the top 5 upside, is if he's getting the targets plus all the work on the ground. The offense looked good overall, really created a lot of explosive plays. My notes on the Raiders, they were 13th in plays and 7th in offensive yards. They played at the 3rd fastest pace of any team. They had the highest pass rate over expectation in the first half. So they came out very aggressive in pushing the ball down the field. And man, makes sense. You know what Chip Kelly cooked up this offseason, it seemed like it worked really well. And it makes sense that he was excited to get out there and test it out, because they were just creating gash plays over and over and getting guys open over and over. I got a cool stat from Hayden Wings. Jacoby Myers is wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game since the Devontae Adams trade, and he looked great in week 1. Avoided 6 tackles in week 1, which is crazy. 6 missed tackles forced. Again, no Christian Gonzalez in this game for the Patriots. But yeah, all the underlying data is great here. 27% first read target rate for Jacoby. The only other noteworthy thing here, I think, is Dante Thornton. 18% first read target rate. It's not bad at all for a rookie wide receiver with the Amari Cooper retirement. He's somebody to keep an eye on. 54% route rate isn't quite where you'd like to see it. Trey Tucker definitely played ahead of him, but Thornton is, we've seen Tucker. Tucker's not a bad player, but we've seen him just not really draw targets, and here we are with 34 routes and only 3 targets. So Thornton is the guy to keep an eye on of the two. Michael Mayer, definitely worth a pickup if the Bowers injury persists. He was out there a lot, out there before even the Bowers injury, was out there more than Bowers. He just wasn't running nearly as many routes, but definitely a talented guy. Caught all 4 targets for 38 yards in this game. I think we'll see him get more involved if Bowers is not able to suit up. Okay, Los Angeles Chargers. Man, we definitely got to get Dan in here next week. This is a crazy undertaking to try to go through all of this and not have any like dead space, dead air. I need my guy Dan. Like, if it's going to be a freaking 2-hour show, might as well just have Dan here and have fun. Los Angeles Chargers, 13th in plays, 5th in yards. Justin Herbert looked incredible. No surprise. The key stat, of course, 2nd in pass rate over expectation for the Chargers. So I thought they were going to come out and run on the Chiefs. They got their new running back. And of course, that's, I think, what the Chiefs expected too. And I think you saw that, where they were really just destroying the Chiefs through play action over and over and over. So maybe this pass rate over expectation is just a game, environment, game level, game matchup based thing. But man, it was fun. And Herbert is the guy to do it, and they've got receivers who were getting open. I was shocked at how open they were against the Chiefs. And then you look at the fantasy point stat charting and it backs it up. Some of the highest win rates of any receivers on any team were these 3 LA Chargers receivers. So maybe this is not, maybe a discouraging week 1 for Ladd McConkey, weirdly. If the pass rate continues to be high, he's so good that it's only a good thing, that they would be passing. He's going to get his. But, you see here, 28% first read target rate for Keenan Allen, 28% for Ladd, 24% for Quentin Johnston. 2 end zone targets for QJ, 1 for Keenan Allen, none for Ladd. So maybe we've got this weird situation where everybody knows how good Ladd McConkey is now. Already last year, we saw a lot of busted plays for QJ touchdowns because defenses were so concerned with stopping Ladd. And maybe we've got it now where that's even more the case. And some of these ancillary pieces are just going to get more looks than we might like compared to last year, where the offense really funneled through McConkey. Yeah, I mean, Keenan had a higher XFP number than Ladd this week. I'm not overreacting to it yet. You love to see 93% route rate for Ladd McConkey. Targets, air yards are good because the game environment was so good. But I do want to see these rates be higher. I think he's so good that he should be at least getting 30% of the first 3 targets. He's so freaking good. I wanted to see the slot rate. Yeah. 50% slot rate for McConkey, 44% for Keenan Allen, 25% for Quentin Johnston. I thought it was interesting that Ladd still had such a high slot rate, even with Keenan Allen there, because I definitely think that McConkey can win on the outside. That's backed by data, but they still used him in the slot a lot. As far as the run game, it's going to be really interesting to see how this develops, because the role was great for Amari Hampton. 80% snap rate, 54% of the routes. But is Najee Harris going to come for more work? He's missed a lot of time. And so if he cuts into this rate, and the Chargers continuing to pass a lot, what do we have with Hampton? I don't really know. Even in this game, he only got 7 points and his XFP was only 11.8. So I don't want to panic on him. I don't want to worry about Ladd. I think it's mostly a good thing that the Chargers came in here and kicked butt against the Chiefs, and I want to just place bets on these good players. But the usage is interesting among the Chargers receivers. And then the fact that Hampton didn't have a better day today is a little bit scary when he had an 81% snap rate. Because he's just not, there's not going to be targets, I don't think. So he's got to run better, or they have to run more. He had the second lowest rushing over expectation number in week 1. Only Kenneth Walker was lower. So just a kind of weird day for Hampton. I wouldn't be overreacting, and like I would still rather have him than TreVeyon Henderson, I believe. I don't want to overreact to this too much, but it is weird to see him with 7 fantasy points and an 81% snap rate, right? LA Rams, 21st in plays, 19th in yards. It was a really good Houston defense. And I think that's the main takeaway here, because Stafford played well, but we really didn't get a whole lot of fantasy goodness. Stafford played well. Devontae Adams played well. Of course, Puka Nacua played well. But just 21st in plays and 19th in yards. So I'm mostly chalking that up to Houston. It's a tough matchup where anytime that you got to worry about a pass rush really getting to Stafford, things can get kind of ugly in LA. My key stat for the Rams is that last year the Rams had the 3rd lowest rate of plays coming from shotgun at 54%. In week 1, it was 35%, the lowest in the league. The Rams ranked 9th in the percentage of plays coming from 12 personnel. So that's 2 tight ends on the field. 44% of plays had 2 tight ends on the field in week 1. Last year, that was 16%, which was the 3rd lowest. So what does life look like without Cooper Kupp? So far, it's a lot more tight ends on the field. They gave money to Tutu Atwell, but his route rate was 53%. Jordan Whittington, who they like a lot, 28% route rate, no targets. Meanwhile, Davis Allen, Colby Parkinson, Tyler Higbee, all mixing in. 56% route rate for Higbee, no targets. So where we're left, tight ends don't matter until Terrence Ferguson is ready to go. And we could just see crazy target numbers for Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua if they're going to play with more 12 personnel. And Tyler Higbee's out there not getting any targets, we're going to see these games where Puka Nacua has a freaking 50% target per out run rate. And when he doesn't have to go get his bleeding eye looked at every 2 minutes, and he gets to run 80% of the routes instead of 66% of the routes, then things really could get nuts. He had 10 catches for 130 yards in this game. It wasn't even a good game for the Rams, really. Devontae Adams is going to be better. Not worried about that. 41% first read target rate for Nacua, 30% for Adams. This is what I'm talking about. Nobody else above 10%. On the ground, it was all Kyren. Here we go. Just another year of the same old thing where we think that Blake Corum or Jarquez Hunter are going to cut into Kyren's work, but the man got paid. Sean McVay loves him. He had one of the best roles of any running back in week 1. Miami Dolphins, 32nd in plays, 30th in yards. Key stat, very weird one. 41% of plays used 4 or more wide receivers. Last year, the highest rate in any game for any team was 27%, and the next highest rate was 16%. The Dolphins were at 41%. I don't know what is going to happen here. It's bizarre. There were only 9 running back runs in the game. Tyreek looking bad again in terms of his separation scores and stuff like that. Matt Harmon's charting showed the same thing last year. I don't know. Vibes are bad. So we saw more Malik Washington than we've seen in the past. First read target rates you can see on the screen here. 25% for Jalen Waddle, 20% for Tyreek Hill, 15% for Malik Washington. I want nothing to do with this. Waddle played well. I think if anybody, it's him. And then, of course, it's HN. Nearly doubled his expected fantasy points. 8 expected fantasy points, 15 actual points. And we've seen him have a really high XFP in the past, when the targets are flowing to HN. We know that he could put up crazy numbers. He saw his playing time scale back in the second half because this game was a bleak place to be, and that's not where we want our beautiful boy. So they got Ollie Gordon in there. HN had a 90% snap rate in the first half. If the Dolphins can be more competitive, then he's a round 1 type of producer for fantasy. And maybe you get something from Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. I'm not buying any of them. I think you just have to hold them at this point and see what happens with the Dolphins, how things shake out here. Minnesota Vikings, 29th in plays, 26th in yards. So it was a weird day. I thought Chicago's defense played really well. The Vikings had a 53% 3-and-out rate. So they were not sustaining drives very well. Only the Titans had a higher percentage of their drives result in a 3-and-out at 57%. First game for the new QB. And like I said, a tough matchup here against Chicago. So that's not a huge surprise, but that's why we saw the overall play volume down. And that's why we didn't really see, anything great for fantasy outside of, JJ McCarthy had a great game. Only the Jets had a lower pass rate over expectation. So the Vikings were 3rd in pass rate over expectation last year. They only had a negative pass rate over expectation in 2 games all year long. And that rate never dropped below negative 10%, which is where they were at in week 1. We really saw everything that Kevin O'Connell told us would happen come to fruition, and that was leaning on the ground game. So let's talk about the ground game. 57% snap rate for Jordan Mason, 47% for Aaron Jones, and we saw things shift more and more to Mason in the second half of this game. They really leaned on Jordan Mason, and it was working. 15 rush attempts out of 23 went to Jordan Mason in the game. In the second half, he had a 60% snap rate and 11 out of 16 rush attempts. Overall, though, Jones, gets I believe it was an end zone target, or it was at least, a target towards the end zone, scores, has more XFP as a result, ran more routes, 38% route rate for Jones and 25% for Mason. I think it's another one of these backfields where it's kind of like Seattle's, where you've got Mason grinding up the middle, and he's just a really good player. And in some games, he's going to be somebody you can use. But there are also going to be games where this low XFP number results in a low actual fantasy point number. For the passing game, it was all funneled to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, as you might expect. 35% first read target rate for Jefferson, 24% for Hawkinson. Next highest rate was 6%. So for all that separation that Jalen Naylor was creating, didn't see any involvement really. 75% route rate for Hawkinson is good. That's good stuff. His route win rate was one of the higher ones at tight end. I think he was third or fourth. So probably can expect better days for Hawkinson. I know Dan's not going to like it, but he's one of the few tight ends I would rather have than Harold Fannin Jr. I do think he's a pretty good player, and he plays for a pretty good coach. And I don't want to assume that the Vikings are just going to be super, super, super run heavy like we saw this week. We could see more dropbacks as JJ gets more settled in here. New England Patriots, 8th in offensive plays. Drake May was number 1 in dropbacks, over 50 dropbacks in week 1 for Drake May. 336 yards of offense against the Raiders. 12th in offensive yards is where the Patriots ranked. My key stat for the Patriots: first in pass rate over expectation on the day, 14%. Love to see that, but that definitely was related to the game script. As I alluded to, we got the 50-plus dropbacks for Drake May. Their first half rate was 6.5%. That increased to 23% in terms of their pass rate over expectation. In the second half, 23%. Only one running back run in the second half. It was Travion Henderson. So we got 7 rushes for 15 yards from Andre Stevenson in the first half, and they said that's enough of that. I think we're going to see more and more Travion. 38% or 34% snap rate here, 32% route rate, but he had nearly twice as many XFP as Ramondre Stevenson. The role is much more favorable for fantasy for him. Probably the biggest no for the Patriots, unless you believe in the Kayshon Boutte stuff, is that Antonio Gibson just wasn't involved. I was worried that we might see weird, Josh McDaniels stuff going on here, where all 3 running backs were in, but he only had an 8% snap rate. And you never know. Things could change. But for now, it looks like it's just those 2. And I think we're going to see more and more of it go to Henderson. For the passing game, 23% first read target rate for Boutte, 20% for Henry, 20% for Stephon Diggs, 13% for Demario Douglas. Only a 5-yard average depth of target for Douglas. We know we're getting with Pop Douglas. He's just a fun catch and run guy. Don't know if there's much upside. I mean, he had -2 yards, but he did find the end zone here. Had 2 end zone targets. Boutte had an end zone target as well. Boutte's average depth of target was 17 yards, so he had 138 air yards. How about 15-yard average depth of target for Hunter Henry? I think a lot of this was fueled by the game script, playing from behind, but it's good. It's good stuff to see these 2 give you some fantasy relevancy. Boutte, over his past 4 games, has averaged like 80, 85 yards per game. He was somebody who was a good prospect, super talented guy. And there are some underlying data points from last year that looked good for Booty. I read Matt Harmon's charting. He's not thrilled with the way they're using Booty. And you see it reflected in the average depth of target here. It's kind of the sacrificial X receiver role is how he describes it, where it's like they're just outside being asked to go win down the field against the opposing cornerback. And for that type of player to be relevant in fantasy, they have to be really good, and the offense has to be good. The quarterback has to be good. I think that has a chance to be good, and that Drake May has a chance to be very good. But if you're picking Booty up expecting anything that you can depend on, you're probably setting yourself up for disappointment there. New Orleans Saints were 7th in plays in week 1 and 16th in offensive yards, 315 yards in the first game under Kellen Moore. Fastest pace in the NFL by far, 200 catchable air yards. I think that was like 7th or 8th. Spencer Rattler, QB9 in catchable ball rate on throws of 5 or more air yards from a clean pocket. Not what I was expecting here. Really a pretty good game from Rattler. He didn't throw down the field a whole lot. If you look at the average depth of targets here, it's 7.6 yards for Juwan Johnson, 6.7 yards for Olave, 8.7 yards for Shaheed. The other most involved route runner was Brandon Cooks with a 74% route rate. His ADOT was 4.5 yards. So how did we get to this 200 catchable air yards? It was just a lot of dropbacks. It was that, Kellen Moore was able to manufacture a pretty functional offense here. The Cardinals allow you to do that. The Cardinals, John Gannon's approach has been to kind of just like sit back and see what you can do. I just didn't think that Rattler would be able to do it. But this I think speaks volumes to Moore and why they were so excited to bring him in here. And so I'm feeling relatively optimistic about these guys. It's still the Saints, and there's probably not going to be very much upside for these players, but Rashid Shaheed, Olave each got an end zone target here. I really liked all the route designs that Moore drew up. We saw both of them involved in a lot of deep outs. I think that they can win in that type of a role. Like, I think that these are two good players, and I think Juwan Johnson is a good player too. And so if Rattler can just be like close to replacement level QB play, and Moore can be somebody who elevates this whole thing, then for PPR purposes, you're going to get decent production from these players, I think. The run game, this is the biggest bummer here for fantasy. 2 targets for Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara with an 81% snap rate and just 11 expected fantasy points. That is not at all what we've grown accustomed to with Alvin Kamara. Maybe Juwan Johnson does affect that. Maybe Rattler, like being willing to scramble and stuff, affects that. That's definitely something to keep an eye on for Kamara, because if he's not, he was number 1 in the running back position in XFP per game last year. So if that number is diminished, and he's aging, and he doesn't maybe have the Clint Kubiak, run game efficiency boosting stuff going on that he benefited from last year, then I don't really know how relevant he's going to be. Like, it's all of a sudden that's like a Tyrone Tracy kind of an outlook, like a Jalen Warren, but not as efficient on the ground kind of an outlook. I guess like a DeAndre Swift, but I think there's more upside for Swift's offense to be good and produce touchdowns. So that, that's not what you want to see if you drafted Kamara. The only other notes was that Kendra Miller was the RB2. He got 5 rush attempts in this game, 13% snap rate. Moving along, New York Giants, 13th in plays and 28th in offensive yards. Rough rough day here at the office for Russ and the whole crew. We were hoping for more from Malik and Neighbors. Didn't get it. Only one deep throw for the Giants offense. Jared Goff, the only quarterback with a lower deep throw rate than Russell Wilson. Tyrone Tracy, third worst in rushing yards over expectation, ahead of only Kenneth Walker and Amarian Hampton. It feels like we might be seeing Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterboom more sooner rather than later. We'll see. Washington's defense, I thought, played pretty well. They got 10 quick pressures on Russ. That might just be an Andrew Thomas stat, though. Although I think he'll be back soon enough. That's their left tackle. But yeah, you look at the underlying stuff here. It's not what you want to see. I was hoping that we would be kind of moved on from the Wan'Dale Robinson stuff, to be honest. But 8 targets for him. And like I said, no deep targets. I really thought we would see more looks for Darius Slayton down the field, for Malik Neighbors. Yeah. The route rates for Neighbors were pretty good. He got more horizontally breaking routes, not as much just like all or nothing kind of routes is what he had last year. Is a lot of deep balls and then a lot of hitches is what he had last year. He had a lot of posts where Daniel Jones wasn't willing. But it felt like a more complete route tree, more what you'd expect for his skill set. So that's good, at least that I think that his route designs last year were indicative of how they felt about Daniel Jones. So, yeah, keep the light on. Jackson Dart could be a lot better with Jackson Dart. 48% first read target rate for Neighbors, 35% for Wan'Dale Robinson. I hope that we see some of that shift over to Theo Johnson or something. 64% route rate for Theo Johnson. So he's like outside of the top 24 tight ends, basically, is where he's at. You need him to have like an 80% route rate or something if he's going to be somebody you can use in this offense. Speaking of 80% route rate, I think that's about where Mason Taylor was, 80% on the dot. The Jets, what a day from the Jets. 13th in plays, 5th in yards. My crazy stat on the Jets is that Justin Fields had the second lowest first read target rate in week 1. So he was getting through his progressions, which we didn't know if he could do, but he looked pretty good at it in week 1. When he targeted his first read, 10 for 10. And that's with an average depth of target of 10.5 yards. So it's not just short stuff. 122 yards and a touchdown on 10 for 10 passing from Fields when targeting his first read. And again, when the first read wasn't there, he was quick, confident, decisive to move on. I thought he made a lot of plays scrambling and improving when needed, which has been something that we've seen from him before, but it was really cool to see it all come together. Just thought it was a really encouraging day for Tanner Engstrand, their offensive coordinator, and for the coaching in general. Everything looked professional here with the Jets. The defense didn't play well. That surprised me because I thought that would be the identity of the team. But the offense more than made up for it. 5th in pre-snap motion for the Jets. 66% pre-snap motion rate. 5th in yards per play on pre-snap motion plays. So great stuff. This is exciting stuff for Mr. Garrett Wilson. And I think that's basically it. 36% target rate for him, 36% first read target rate for him. So I don't know if maybe Mason Taylor will matter in time. It's good to see him out there so much. They used him in motion a lot. But it seems like it's just going to be Wilson and Brees. That's my guess, at least. As for Wilson, yeah, he was somebody who I was low on coming into the year. I wasn't sure that the offensive volume could support him being top 15 receiver or giving you the kind of upside that made you, happy to have taken him instead of some of the other receivers who I thought could give you a huge, top 8, top 10 finish or even higher in that range. But if Justin Fields can play this well and the ink strand stuff is legit and sticks and defenses aren't able to, adjust to this and stop it better than we saw. I mean, this was against the Steelers, this wasn't against the Dolphins or the Patriots or whatever here. So if this stuff can stick, then I think Wilson could get there through elite efficiency. It was just tough to predict because he's never done that. He's not been an efficient player. He's been a very high volume player. But what we saw in week 1 definitely suggests that I could have just been wrong on that. He could be a big hit. Like on the other side of the ball, DK Metcalf was another player who, for a lot of the same reasons, I was pretty out on for fantasy. And of the two, it's like this is the one that looks more sustainable to me. We'll get to the Steelers offense in a second here. As far as the backfield, we hit on it quite a bit at the top, but in case you missed that, we've got a 58% snap rate for Brees and a 31% snap rate for Braylon Allen. But when they were in the red zone, things shifted more towards Allen. And I think that you never want to overreact to red zone carries within a single game. Sometimes it's just influenced by who was on the field when the drive got to the red zone, and you might only have a handful of drives to get to the red zone, if any. I think snap rate is a little bit better, a little stickier game to game. So that's what I'm referencing here. 55% red zone snap rate for Braylon Allen compared to 36% for Brees. 3 rushes in the red zone for Allen, 2 for Brees, and 1 for Isaiah Davis. 1 carry from inside the 10 for Braylon Allen, 1 carry inside the 10 for Brees Hall. So he might just keep that work all year. Braylon Allen might. Brees Hall, for as explosive as he looked and as great as he did at creating yards after contact, he wasn't like running through guys a whole lot and just like driving guys. He's a strong dude, but like I think that's what they like so much and value in Braylon Allen is that they think he can like push the pile. Yeah, of course, the route rate, again, I'll just mention 28% for Brees Hall. They just use their running backs to block a lot. They did just have an injury on the offensive line, but overall, the offensive line played really well in this game. So I would expect that they'll weaponize these guys, especially Brees Hall, in the receiving game because they need other pieces other than just Garrett Wilson, But in this game, they had them block a lot. They didn't have them run a lot of routes. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think that it will change. Philadelphia Eagles, 13th in offensive plays, 18th in offensive yards. As expected, life after Kellen Moore wasn't quite as fantasy friendly. Slight decrease in pace, shotgun rate, play action, pre-snap motion, just kind of becomes a more conservative run first offense, and it already was really run first, right? No drastic changes that I found. The real takeaway is the AJ Brown stuff. So fantasy points data tracked AJ Brown as having 0 wins in terms of route win rate, actually creating separation on his own. And you look at the first read target rate, it's 10%, 30% for Devontae Smith, 30% for Dallas Goedert, 20% for Jahan Dotson. This is not what we've come to expect from AJ Brown. You might also notice a 7% slot rate, 69% for Devontae Smith. So I bring that up because I think Matt Harmon's reception perception charting here is really interesting. So I'm just going to read this, and you have to go check out Matt's stuff. I almost feel a little bit bad about ever sharing it for free because it's so cool. And so I don't do it all that often, but this stuff on AJ Brown is really important. I do want the Beyond the Box Score listeners to know. So the box score for AJ Brown was not kind, and the film wasn't any better. In fact, it was even more discouraging than the fact that he didn't receive a target until there was less than 2 minutes remaining in the season opener. Brown led all charted receivers last year with a 79% success rate versus man coverage, In week 1, it was 44%. That's way different than, anything we've ever seen from A.J. Brown in any game. And basically what Matt speculated was that we had him in kind of a decoy role. He was basically just going out wide and going deep. Like there was no nuance to his route tree. I am going to be aggressively moving him down in my like weekly rankings after digging into all of this. If this is where we're at for Brown, even if it means I miss out on a week where he goes off, I want to just wait and see because I don't want to just be putting him out there if he's not healthy. And he had 1 fantasy point. His expected fantasy points was 1. I don't want 1 expected fantasy point. That's not what I want. It will hopefully change at some point soon, but things do not look good. And to get it from Matt and people who are like watching every route to just like be like, yep, he doesn't look right. You need to listen to that, I think, for until we see something different. Will Shipley got hurt in this game, and so it was just all Saquon and AJ Dillon from that point on. They traded for Tank Bigsby. They said to be a kick returner, but there's nothing to report here. It's Saquon Barkley. 67% route rate is good. That's higher than normal for him. The Eagles had a 67% stacked box rate is what they faced this week. And still, Saquon has a great game. He's insane. I mean, there were plays where they had him dead to right, and he makes 2 guys miss and turns what should have been -2 into like 6 or 8. It's crazy how good this guy is. Pittsburgh Steelers, 26th in plays, 21st in yards, but 4 passing touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers in this crazy, crazy game against the Jets. Key stats on the Steelers, 4.2 yards is the average depth of target for Aaron Rodgers in this game. That tied Jared Goff for the lowest in the league. 72% of the passing yards came after the catch. That was the highest in the league. 83% of Rodgers' targets went to his first read. That was the 3rd highest in the league. So the reason I highlight that is, one, there's maybe not so much upside if they're not going to produce 4 passing touchdowns with such a low average depth of target. But 2, the really high first read rate, the yards after the catch, and then this next stat kind of, to me, suggests like what it looked like, which is this isn't the Aaron Rodgers offense that I know, that I see, no matter who's the coordinator. This looks like Arthur Smith is the one engineering what's happening here, and Rodgers is going along with it. And so that is pretty interesting to me, and it worked really well. The other stat is 9 screen attempts for the Steelers in week 1. That's the most in a Mike Tomlin coached game since 2019. 4 screens for Jonnu Smith, who they traded for rather aggressively. Arthur Smith has a history with. 4 screen targets for Jonnu Smith. 3 for Kenny Gainwell. 1 for DK Metcalf. 1 for Calvin Austin. If you're watching on YouTube here, you see the first read target rates, 24% for Metcalf, 24% for Calvin Austin, 20% for Jonnu Smith, 12% for Pat Freiermuth. Route rates, Jonnu's at 53%. So that's not really a role I want to trust. 4 of his 6 targets were screens, but getting the ball in his hands intentionally like this makes him interesting. There's not a lot of tight ends who you know might get manufactured touches. So keep an eye on that. The only other thing I have really is Calvin Austin is a baller, and it's really wild to me to see him come out here and basically have the same volume as DK Metcalf. The Metcalf usage was weird. Only an average depth of target of 3.7 yards, 26 air yards on 7 targets is weird. I don't know what to expect from him. I think I want to just avoid it is still where I'm at, because if the low ceiling nature of this remains this way with the low average depth of target for the offense and everything. I just don't think he's the type of player who can create the efficiency needed within that to be even like a top 30 fantasy receiver. Maybe if he's getting, like Garrett Wilson type of target share, but that's not what we saw here. So that's where I'm at with Metcalf. I could be wrong. He could have had a bigger game here, but I didn't feel like Aaron Rodgers. He played well. Like he can still throw it for sure. Like if you even just watch his film last year when I did those cut ups this summer, he's still spinning it. But I think defenses are going to get him sped up more and more than the Jets. The Jets defense really didn't play very well in this game. The tackling was awful. Yeah, I don't want to overreact to one game in terms of the 4 touchdowns for Rodgers. In terms of the run game, not really what you want to see for Jaylen Warren. 48% snap rate in his first NFL start and only a 24% route rate. He did have the most pass blocking snaps, but Gainwell was close behind him. So I think he's splitting the passing down work there. And at some point, Caleb Johnson might come for more early down work. It was obviously a rough game for Caleb. I just think it's weird that Gainwell played so much in a neutral game script and had 7 rush attempts. I don't really understand that. But I've learned that it's a waste of my time to try to understand what's happening with Arthur Smith. San Francisco 49ers. Everybody's hurt. It's going to be as much Christian McCaffrey as that guy can handle. And he's obviously a monster, but that scares me a little bit. Sounds like good news on Juwan Jennings. He might be back this week. That would help a lot. 49ers were 18th in plays and 20th in yards. So not a good game for their standards. Normally they're up in the top 10 or 12. And still, we get the 30 expected fantasy points for Christian McCaffrey. My key stat is that George Kittle played the first quarter, played 6 snaps in the second quarter. On 13 dropbacks with him in the game, Purdy fed Kittle a 44% target share. He got 4 of 4 targets for 25 yards and a touchdown. He was having a monster game. Everything was funneling through him. Christian McCaffrey had 1 target. Juwan Jennings had none before Kittle got hurt. After the injury, CMC piled up 9 more targets, 45% target per route run rate after Kittle got hurt. Jennings got all 5 of his targets after Kittle got hurt. 39% target per route run rate for Jennings after the Kittle injury. Only an 8.4 yard average depth of target for Jennings. Compare that to Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall's average depth of target was 19 yards. So to me, that suggests that Jennings and CMC are the players who are probably going to benefit from Kittle's absence the most. I don't have any Tonjes thoughts for you in terms of the backup tight end. He had a 51% route rate after Kittle's injury, found the end zone, but not probably someone you want to use for fantasy. 4% first read target rate for Tonjes. 26% first read target rate for Pearsall. This guy is very good, very, very fun to watch, and massive, massive upside with the role. So we've got 140 air yards piled up here, and that's with 7 targets. I think we could see that target number rise. What if he gets the deep targets down the field and he starts to get more short yardage stuff, more catch and run stuff, 2 end zone targets as well? Was this close to scoring on one of them. Really just looked deadly as a route runner. I think you might be able to trade for him. I don't know, because like with Kittle injury news and everything, people might kind of wise up, but only 12.8 fantasy points. And to me, like, he could absolutely, if Purdy's healthy, produce like a top 10 fantasy receiver. I definitely think that's in his range of outcomes. And Juwan Jennings might not be a bad target either. If Kittle is going to miss extended time, which it sounds like, Jennings might remind us who he is, who we saw last year, if they have to go to him more at this point. Seattle Seahawks, my biggest disappointment from week one was watching the Seattle offense. 27th in plays, 29th in yards, and we didn't get any of the pre-snap motion, play action stuff. The good stuff that we have come to know and love from Clint Kubiak just wasn't there. I don't know. I'm so sad about it. I think I haven't even talked about Kenneth Walker yet, too. Like, I got way too far out with my confidence on Kenneth Walker, and it just all came crashing down. I think there's a real chance that we just haven't really seen what this offense is going to be, and it's just a weird week one thing, and we need to maybe give some patience and grace. It's a first-time play caller here with a new team, not a first-time play caller, but first time with this new team, with a new quarterback, with a lot of new pieces here. I don't know. I know I saw that Mike McDonald, the head coach, is like, yeah, we've got to have more motion. We definitely have to have more motion. So yeah, that's where I'm at, is like, maybe this isn't what we're going to see year long, but it is what we saw in week one. You see all the way down here, 5% play action rate, like a 33% pre-snap motion rate. This Clint Kubiak was like breaking records. He was doing stuff we never seen in terms of using pre-snap motion and play action last year with the Saints. Was lighting the league on fire. And then we come out and just get this super bland week one game. It's super weird. All of the targets are just funneled to Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't know. 67% first read target rate for Njigba. Like, this isn't real offense. I don't want to be too reactive to any of it. I'm worried about the running backs. I'm worried about Kenneth Walker for sure. I don't know if he's healthy. I'm a little bit worried that the offensive line didn't perform better. Walker was hit behind the line of scrimmage on average after they just completely bullied people in the preseason. But so much of what they were doing in the preseason was involving motion. Like, to get this vanilla game plan is just so weird. And so I'm not overreacting to any of it. My takeaways are Jackson Smith and Jigba is who we thought he might be, who he has shown us at times that he is. He's given us some really ridiculous games dating back to Ohio State last year as well. He has these games where he's locked in and no one can stop him. It's the technicality. It's the route running. It's the refinement as a route runner. And then also at the catch point where it's just like, if the ball's on the money, there's nothing you can do. And that's kind of what we saw here, is that even though we're getting over half of the targets, 2/3 of the targets basically funneled to one guy, he's catching almost 70% of them. He's producing 124 yards on a day where the offense could do nothing else. He's really, really good. Cooper Kupp, this is another takeaway for me. It seems like there's a reason that Sean McVay let Cooper Kupp walk. And week one kind of validified that decision, right? He was out there basically the whole game, and he had 15 yards. So we'll see what happens with this offense going forward. Only 48% of plays used 3 or more receivers, even while playing from behind. So that is a bad note for Torrey Horton, who ran 16 routes and did not have a single target. And per Fantasy Point Status Suite, was winning on his routes. I haven't watched them because I've already been crying about Kenneth Walker every night. Like, give me a break. I think it's a good note for JSN that, we've got more tight ends out here on the field. And so it's like, all you got to do is like get even you don't even have to get separation. And I'm probably going to throw it to you because I trust you more than Cooper Kupp, and he also doesn't have separation. Weird times for the Seahawks. For the run game, 58% snap rate for Charbonnet, 40% for Walker. This is a fullback, Robbie Ousts. 36% route rate for Charbonnet. Both running backs coming in at 10 XFP. I think if Gray Zabel and the boys get to doing their thing and pushing people around and we get some motion, the run game could be a lot better. We've got 2 really good running backs here. Hopefully things are better soon. 3 more teams. Thanks for everybody who's stuck with me this far. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not a great day for Baker Mayfield. The Bucs finished 23rd in plays, 24th in yards. Key stats for the Bucs, they were 6th in pass rate over expectation, which is what you want to see. I think it makes sense. The line is unsettled, and so the run game didn't work very well, and so the Bucs passed a lot. And we did see, even within that script, that Bucky Irving, his role was secure. That's great. In some realities, maybe we see Rachaad White playing a bigger role with the more pass-heavy plan. That's not what we saw here. 21 routes for Irving, 7 routes for Rachaad White, 25% snap rate for White, only 1 snap for Sean Tucker. So, Bucky Irving has been not quite at the Derrick Henry level of chart breaking, but he's been one of the biggest, producers relative to XFP that we have at the running back position. Will we see that going forward? It's tough to say. So we've got the offensive line until Wirfs come back as a potential concern. Then there's also the screen game. Only 3 screen targets here for the Bucs, while the Jags, we see with Liam Cohen, the Jags are 3rd in the NFL with 7 screens. They're getting the ball to the running backs in the screen game. We didn't see that as much here with the Bucs. Only 28% of the yards coming after the catch for the Bucs in this game. Again, I'll compare that to Liam Cohen and the Jags, 48% for Trevor Lawrence. Last year, it was 55% for Baker Mayfield. Career high, by far. Only 28% in week 1. It's just 1 week. You don't want to overreact, but things didn't look quite the same. I was less worried about the foundation than I was Detroit. And I think that the players here are good, so I don't want to freak out here. I think Bucky is probably a really good buy in fantasy. And I think Baker will be fine. But Baker had one of his least accurate days that we've seen in several years, is what we saw from the Bucs. 30% first 3 target for Mike Evans, 20% for Emeka Egbuka. Nobody else was above 10%. Egbuka had an 89% route rate. He was getting the ball down the field. I want to see his targets be higher if we're going to place bets on him as any type of, explosive upside player. I think people are going to be really excited to start him and push him ahead of some players that maybe they shouldn't after week 1. He had 22 fantasy points, but only 11.6 expected fantasy points. 20% first 3 target rate is not very high. So he's really good, and it's good to get confirmation of that, but it wasn't like some takeover or anything like that. He didn't get the Chris Godwin role or anything like that. It was just, I don't know. It was a weird game. It was a weird game for the Bucs. And I think this is again it's week 1. A lot of these coaches don't want to show everything right away. Tennessee Titans. This game was better for Cam Ward on film than in the stat sheet. I will just say that. Shout out to my boy Scott Barrett. I saw him getting dragged online. What a nerd. It was better. I put a thread together as I watched the film on Cam Ward. You can watch that if you're curious. He made some phenomenal throws. He made some mistakes too. He took some sacks that killed drives. But he's playing in freaking Mile High, first start ever. The line was bad. The receivers let him down. Calvin Ridley didn't present very many open targets, and when he did get the ball, they bounced off of his hands a lot. So you see on the screen here, Calvin Ridley, 26% first read target rate compared to 37% for Alec Manor. I think that it will shift back to Ridley. But I don't know. It was about as bad of a week one as he could have had, I feel like. Tough matchup. I don't want to overreact, but it's not what we want to see. Gunnar Helm. Big fan of Gunnar Helm here. Didn't get to play very much, but did get some sideline targets from QB1. So you'll love to see the trust there. But overall, just not a whole lot going here for the offense, for the passing game. Cam Ward had 12 quick pressures. So that's a pressure that happens in 2.5 seconds or less. 12 quick pressures in week one. Only Drake May and Spencer Rattler had more. Overall, had the highest pressure rate of any quarterback, 53% pressure rate for Cam Ward. Joe Burrow was next at 43%. So really brutal conditions to be playing in your first start. Yeah, I think we'll see better days ahead for this team. Jay Okonkwo, 76% route rate. So that sustained from what we saw in the preseason. He's locked in for now, at least, as the clear tight end one. Tyler Lockett, 71% snap rate, 2 air yards. He was almost only playing in the slot. So it seems that the good Tyler Lockett days are behind us. That's sad. Super fun player. Washington Commanders. That's not how you spell that. I need a break. 84% route rate for Terry McLaurin, 78% for Deebo Samuel, 70% for Zach Ertz. Rookie Jalen Lane coming in at just 35%. The backfield was mostly Austin Eckler's, 29% snap rate for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, 19% for Jeremy McNichols, and 48% for Eckler. Only 5 routes run for Bill Krosky-Merritt. This doesn't look like a very relevant backfield for fantasy. Wasn't a lot of targets for Eckler, only 6 rushes for Eckler, 7 expected fantasy points. I'm not starting any of these players. They've got the Packers this week. If you just saw what the Packers did to the Lions run game, maybe temper your expectations for our guy Bill, but maybe Cliff Kingsbury continues to surprise us. He has really been effective at drawing up his run game there. And you never want to bet against Bill, but yeah, that's a tough spot. I'm going to wait and see if the role develops for him. The Commanders finished 9th in plays. They tied the Ravens for 2nd in yards, 432 yards of offense. Only 21 points. So I think we'll see some regression there. Could have a shootout right away here in week 2. They were 2nd in rush success rate. So again, shout out Cliff Kingsbury. And they had 29% of their offensive plays go for 10 or more yards. Only the Ravens had a higher rate. So we're getting the consistency. We're getting the explosive plays. I thought Deebo Samuel looked good. So if he's an improvement over what they got last year, if Laramie Tunz was an improvement over what they had last year, if Bill Krosky-Merritt's an improvement over what they had last year, it's a pretty good offense. That's what we saw in week 1. It's going to be really, really fun to see them put to the test. On Thursday night football, don't have much else here. XFP for Terry Lauren, only 5.9. The separation scores were not good. The first read target rate was not good either. 36% for Deebo Samuel, 23% for Zach Ertz, 18% for McLaurin. So I'm avoiding him, waiting and seeing until the target rates improve. This is a trend that we've seen from receivers who hold out and miss time in the early process of getting ready for the season, is that often their targets take time to get back to where you're used to seeing them. And so that might be where we're at with McLaurin, and that is probably a good no for Deebo Samuel. Dan said that he just would outright rather roster Deebo than McLaurin going forward, and I think that's totally fair. So tough look for anybody who drafted McLaurin early. But like I said, this offense could be really, really good. So will it surprise anybody if he goes for 150-2 against Green Bay? No, he's a stud. Okay, thank you guys so much for being here. I have no idea how we did in terms of numbers or anything like that. I'm pretty sure I blacked out at some point and just read a bunch of numbers off the screen. Claps in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, that was fun. Definitely want to get Dan in here and figure out a way to make this not so long. But if you liked it, let us know in the comments. I just want to give you guys all this information. I want to get you everything you need to know so you can kind of make sense of things. The early season here is tough to navigate, like I barely been sleeping, I feel like, trying to watch it all. And then fantasy points data is obviously addicting and problematic for my personality because there's so much for me to find in here and dig into. And so I hope it makes sense. I hope it felt accessible for you guys and not like just a bunch of random numbers. Let me know in the comments what works for you, if there's anything that you're confused by or want clarity on. Let me know for sure. On that note, I think that we can get this in the video description. Josh, I asked producer Aaron about it, and he said he thinks he can do it permanently. So I don't know if it'll be in this one or not. But in the lab is an installment of the FFT newsletter that I'm doing each week on Fridays. And so what I'm talking about is a Google form where you can just let me know what you want to know more about. So if any of the concepts that I'm talking about are new to you and you want to know more about it, or if you just want to know more about a player, hopefully I can, by doing this, you got to basically every player. But if there is more that you want to know about, there is a space available for you to submit that to me so I can dig through there and see what people, even if I'm not able to get to it in the newsletter, it's good to know what is on your guys' mind so that I can do a better job of making it presentable and making it understandable when I come to you in this space. I can't possibly get to all of the stuff on Twitter. I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm tweeting basically nonstop. And so the notifications reciprocate that. There's no possible way to keep up with it all. And so this is the way that I can do it. If you want to get in touch with me, this is the best way, is through the FFT newsletter, Google form. And then on Fridays, I'll respond to everything I can. I'll give you rankings updates as well. That's free. Definitely check that out. Thank you guys and girls and everybody for being here. Please like the video. Please juice it all up for Dan the Man. And I'll see you tomorrow. See you on Thursday. Ryan, Heath, and I will be here to give you all the updates you need on matchups and what defenses did in week 1 and what we think they might do against the offenses they're facing in week 2 and how that might affect your start-sit decisions. If any of you guys like DFS, Ryan is that big time into that, and so he can help you with some of those thoughts as well. I'm hoping to make it mostly a start-sit show and dig into the matchups for some of these tougher decisions on the peripherals here of fantasy relevance. So that's kind of where I think our cadence makes most sense here, is to go all the usage stuff, get you caught up on what the offenses are doing, and then see how that might interact with the next matchups the next week. So there it is. Thank you guys for following along, and I'll see you soon.